vicious light flashed through the green-haired being's eyes, and he abruptly stepped forward as if he were about to attack. However, right at this moment, his companion suddenly flashed over to his side and transmitted his voice to the green-haired being, as if to remind him of something. A hesitant look appeared on the green-haired being's face, and moments later, the animosity radiating from his body eased as he said in a cold voice, "All right, let's see what's in this valley first. If it's not the immortal Xianxia, then we'll go our separate ways, but if it's in there, hee." The green-haired being chuckled coldly, before paying no further heed to the opposing dupe, and entering the valley that was enshrouded under devilish chi with his companion. The woman took a deep breath upon seeing this, then turned to the elderly man as she asked, "What do we do, Uncle Yan? Are we really going to enter the valley with them?" "Of course, the formation plate has displayed a reaction, so we can't ignore it," the elderly man replied without any hesitation. "But those two," the woman was rather hesitant. "Those two won't do anything if the immortal Xianxia is not in there, but if it really is in there, then that's even more reason for us to enter this valley. Otherwise, why did we take the risk to enter these mountain ranges in the first place?" the elderly man said in a dark voice with a decisive shake of his head. "You're right, Uncle Yan. Forgive me for not thinking things through properly. It looks like we really will need to venture into this valley," the woman said as she gritted her teeth after a brief hesitation. "Don't be too concerned. My past injuries haven't completely healed, but I've prepared a special treasure especially for this trip. If we obtain the immortal Xianxia, then we'll definitely be able to get away as long as we don't fight fire with fire," the elderly man said in a confident manner. With the close bond the two of them shared, the woman naturally wasn't going to doubt his words. As such, the hint of uneasiness in her heart was erased as she nodded in response. Thus, the two of them also flew down into the valley as streaks of light. However, as soon as they entered the valley, the elderly man was surprised to discover that this ordinary-looking valley was immeasurably deep. The upper half of the valley was enshrouded under faint black devilish chi, yet the lower half was like a bottomless abyss. Even after descending for over 10,000 feet, the bottom was still nowhere in sight. This made the elderly man both excited, but also slightly concerned. He was excited that this valley was so unique, which made it quite possible that the immortal Xianxia was actually lurking here. But he was also concerned that, with the depth of the valley and the high density of the devilish chi here, it would be quite difficult to search through it. With that in mind, the elderly man and the woman each produced a formation plate-like treasure before heading deeper into the valley. If it weren't for the fact that the green-haired being and his companion were also present, they'd have most likely split up for greater efficiency. However, as things currently were, they certainly weren't going to do something so risky that could result in them being divided and conquered. Thus, the two of them descended one after another, disappearing into the black chi within the valley after just a few flashes. Meanwhile, deep within a lake at the bottom of the valley, there was a black creature with its body half buried in the mud of the lake bed. The creature stirred, and a pair of green eyes sprang open on its body, revealing a pair of completely emotionless pupils. Tens of thousands of kilometers away from the valley, a giant toad that was several tens of feet tall was traveling quickly with a formation plate held in its mouth, and 7 or 8 strange-looking devilish beasts alongside it. The giant toad cast its gaze toward the formation plate in its mouth from time to time, and it wasn't moving very quickly, but it was also heading directly toward the valley. A massive dragonfly-like crimson devilish beast was also holding a formation plate as it flew along directly behind the giant toad, and it suddenly said, "Master, I can sense irregular fluctuations coming from that valley, but that's the lair of that devilish crocodile. That thing is extremely fierce and powerful. We may not be able to defeat it if a battle were to break out. We'll have to notify Master Tai Mo and get him to take care of that thing in person. HMPH, it's not a case of we may not be able to defeat it in battle. If we barge into its lair, we'll get eaten by it for sure. That devilish crocodile is one step away from becoming a holy grade devilish beast, and even the 3 holy grade masters wouldn't want to mess with it for no good reason. Are you sure you're sensing things correctly? Is the formation plate really leading us toward the valley? If you get it wrong, don't blame me for turning on you," Ju Chu replied in an indifferent voice. "Rest assured, Master. I've checked more than 10 times already, and I'm 100% sure that the formation plate is reacting to that valley," the devilish beast replied as a confident light flashed through its compound eyes. "All right, if we really do end up finding that immortal Xianxia in that valley, you'll be rewarded handsomely for your efforts. The giant toad wasn't speaking in a very enthusiastic manner, thereby indicating that it wasn't actually getting its hopes. It was no wonder that this was the case. It had led a bunch of high-grade devilish beasts into the outskirts of the Golden Devil mountain ranges, and they'd killed many spirit realm beings before taking their formation plates, but they found no useful leads surrounding the immortal Xianxia. The formation plates had reacted over 10 times thus far, yet all of those instances had been false alarms. As such, it was a similar story to the boy who cried wolf. After a while, the giant toad simply couldn't be bothered to get its hopes up anymore. It was even beginning to consider what direction they were going to continue their search in, if there proved to be nothing in the valley. As for the high-grade devilish beasts behind it, all of them were also in rather low spirits from what appeared to be a wild goose chase that they'd been led on. Thus, the group of devilish beasts continued onward in a distracted manner, and they failed to notice that there was a cloud of thin crimson mist that was following them from behind close to 10 kilometers away. Within the crimson mist, a barely visible slender figure could be seen. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D4 2B, letter 1D5 56, letter 1D5 F2, letter 1D6 04, letter 1D6 80, letter 1D5 54, letter 1D5 60, letter 1D4 26. After Han Li and Xian had departed from the mountain ranges where the devilish ape had been situated, their journey proved to be a very smooth one. They didn't encounter any obstacles along the way, and most of their journey was completed within just 5 days as they arrived back at the sea of thin mist where the human-faced vultures had been slain. Both of them were quite eager to finish the journey, but they still decelerated at the sight of this sea of thin mist, and after holding a brief discussion, they flew into the sea of mist in a cautious manner. Han Li was flying within a streak of azure light in an expressionless manner, with faint blue light flashing through his eyes. At the same time, he was holding a spirit stone in each hand, constantly absorbing the pure spiritual qi within during his flight. Due to the fact that they'd been constantly traveling, he didn't get a chance to meditate in order to replenish his magic power. However, after consuming a large number of precious pills and using top-grade spirit stones to facilitate recovery, Han Li had regained most of his lost magic power. However, the Provenance True Devil projection had barely recovered at all. Even so, Han Li was still quite relieved that he'd returned to somewhere near the peak of his powers. If they were to encounter some powerful devilish beasts now, he had confidence in his ability to defeat them. However, as he swept his spiritual sense toward an inky black spirit beast bracelet up his sleeve, his mood soured slightly. The Weeping Soul Beast was still completely unconscious. As he swept his spiritual sense toward the spirit beast, he discovered that it had recovered half of its magic power and energy already, which was an extraordinarily fast recovery considering how severely depleted it had been. However, it displayed no reaction whatsoever when he tried to communicate with the beast and awaken it using his spiritual sense. If it weren't for the fact that he could still sense his spiritual connection with the Weeping Soul Beast, he'd almost be led to believe that it was dead. Of course, this wasn't to say that Han Li couldn't force the beast to wake up if he wanted to. However, after contemplating the matter a few times, he decided against it in the end. From his past experience, the spirit beast would only fall into this type of deep slumber as a way to protect itself or to facilitate evolution, and in both situations, it would be extremely unwise to forcibly awaken it. Han Li had always held the Weeping Soul Beast in extremely high regard, and its importance in his heart only grew after that extraordinary display of power it had put on a few days ago. As such, he wasn't going to take any chances with it, and was going to allow it to wake up of its own accord. With that in mind, Han Li rid himself of that train of thought and withdrew his spiritual sense before inspecting his own internal condition. At this moment, within his Danshan, the azure nascent soul that was emanating shimmering golden spiritual light had its hands joined together in front of its chest, cradling a silver fireball in a completely motionless manner. However, the silver fireball was in a rather strange state. It had been a pure silver ball of flames in the past, but there was now a small wisp of white flames intermingled into it, and there were silver runes flashing incessantly within the entire fireball. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. The white flames were naturally none other than the wisp of golden crow true flames that the silver fireball had devoured from the human-faced vulture. The spirit engulfing heavenly flames, ability to absorb and fuse with other spirit flames, as well as strange types of energy, was quite an incredible ability. If things were to continue like this, Han Li was very much looking forward to seeing just what it could evolve into in the end. The spirit engulfing heavenly flames were refining the golden crow true flames without any issues, so Han Li withdrew his spiritual sense and began to focus more on his surroundings. This sea of mist covered quite a large area, but Han Li and Xianxia flew through it without encountering any devilish beasts. It appeared that those human-faced vultures were the only high-grade devilish beasts in the area, and they'd only been recently killed, so no other high-grade devilish beasts had had a chance to move into this area yet. As such, this leg of the journey also proved to be quite a smooth one. Due to how uneventful the return journey was, Han Li and Xianxia were naturally covering ground a lot faster than when they'd come. Half a day later, they passed through the entire sea of mist and arrived at its border. However, after emerging from the sea of mist, the streak of azure light instantly came to an abrupt halt, and Han Li was revealed as the azure light faded. At this moment, he was looking up ahead in a slightly pale-faced manner. Around 2,000 to 3,000 feet ahead of them, black winds were sweeping violently through the area as hundreds of mid-grade and high-grade devilish beasts hovered in the air. The leader of these devilish beasts was a burly humanoid creature with a pair of massive black horns. It was clad in a suit of black metal armor, and its upper body was identical to that of a human, but its lower body was covered in black beastly fur. As soon as Han Li appeared in the area, it also cast a surprised gaze toward him. Around 500 to 600 feet before the humanoid devilish beast was a silver-armored man in a crimson flying carriage, and they were locked in a tense confrontation. This silver-armored being was naturally none other than the man with the gooey surname. Perhaps it was simply a coincidence, but the route it had taken just so happened to intersect at this point with the one that Han Li was taking. Upon seeing the bewildered look on the horned devilish beast's face, the silver-armored man's brows furrowed slightly, and he hurriedly turned back, just in time to see Han Li and Xianxia emerge from the sea of mist behind him. The silver-armored being faltered slightly before an elated look appeared on his face. He had seemed to be quite calm and collected earlier, but he was actually feeling quite anxious internally. After parting with Han Li and Xianxia, he had traveled without pause toward the exit of the Golden Devil Mountain ranges without any pause, yet he had still been intercepted by so many devilish beasts, so he was naturally quite stunned and enraged. Most of these beasts were mid-grade devilish beasts, but there were over 30 high-grade devilish beasts among them, and the humanoid horned devilish possessed a similar cultivation base to his. He was rather conceited, but even he knew that a battle here would spell certain death for him. His only hope was to delay these devilish beasts somehow, then escape as quickly as he could. However, he then caught sight of the 7 or 8 high-grade winged devilish beasts among the beast pack up ahead, and he was growing quite hesitant again. It was quite clear that those devilish beasts had to be extremely fast. If there were only 2 or 3 of them, he could try and throw them off his trail somehow, but if that many of them were to mob him at once, then he was still dead for sure. However, Han Li's arrival instantly alleviated the pressure on his shoulders significantly, increasing his chances of survival, which were objectively less than 10%, by several tens of percentage points. As such, the silver-armored being was naturally ecstatic. Xianxia's face had paled considerably upon witnessing this situation, while Han Li was slightly more composed, but he was also contemplating something with a grave expression on his face. There were many devilish beasts up ahead, but all of them had already attained intelligence. As such, even though they were appraising the 3 beings before them with animosity in their eyes, they weren't screeching and howling like a pack of mindless beasts. Thus, a peculiar silence ensued. However, in the next instant, the silence was suddenly shattered by a burst of hearty laughter. "Haha, it's you. You're the one who killed the young master. If I can kill you or capture you alive, master will reward me handsomely. Kill them. Kill the other 2 and try to capture that one alive." Wu Qi suddenly threw his head back and chortled with glee at the sight of Han Li before issuing an order in a menacing manner. The devilish beasts behind him were all itching for action, and upon hearing this command, all of them roared in unison before charging toward Han Li's trio with gusts of black winds howling in their wake. A dozen or so streaks of light surged on ahead, overtaking the rest of the pack as they hurtled toward Han Li's trio. These were all either 3-headed devilish birds or a type of massive winged insect. As for Wu Qi, green light swirled around his body, and a mundane-looking green disk appeared beneath his feet. The disc was carrying him through the air at an astonishing speed that was comparable to the flying devilish beasts, and it was about to reach Han Li in a flash. Split up. Han Li forcibly repressed his shock at being recognized by this horned demon as he issued a quick instruction, then flew into the distance as a streak of azure light. After just a few flashes, he had covered a distance of over 400 feet, and he showed no signs of slowing down. As opposed to flying directly toward the devilish beasts or retreating back into the mist, he was flying directly off to the side. Xianxia and the silver-armored man also reacted quite quickly. Almost as soon as Han Li sprang into action, the silver-armored man opened his mouth to expel a cloud of crimson qi that disappeared into the flying carriage beneath his feet. A burst of loud ghostly wails rang out from the crimson carriage, and it abruptly disappeared on the spot. However, the carriage then reappeared out of thin air over 1,000 feet away, and it transformed into a cloud of black qi amid a sharp shriek before hurtling into the distance. As for Xianxia, she also gritted her teeth upon hearing Han Li's instruction, and she rustled a sleeve to summon a small translucent flag. White light then flashed from her body before instantly forming a gigantic ball of white light, and several tens of identical white balls shot forth from it in all directions in unison. Each and every ball of light was astonishingly fast, and all of them left trails of afterimages in their wake as they sped away into the distance. The dozen or so white balls of light that flew toward the pack of beasts all vanished upon being attacked by the devilish beasts, but most of them managed to escape to over 1,000 feet away. Despite the fact that there were so many high-grade devilish beasts present, none of them were able to identify in which ball of light Xianxia's true body could be found. All three spirit realm beings were proving to be very difficult to capture, regardless of what their cultivation bases were, and Wu Qi was quite infuriated by this development. He let loose a thunderous roar as he swung his massive hands through the air, instantly destroying two of the balls of light that were passing him by. Immediately thereafter, the green disk beneath his feet transformed into a vibrant green canoe in a flash, then hurtled directly toward Han Li. There was also an inky black devilish falcon that was around 10 feet in length, as well as a giant azure wasp with lightning flashing all over its body, chasing Han Li in hot pursuit. All three of them were determined to capture him, and their speed was not inferior to Han Li's. Meanwhile, there were also several fast high-grade devilish beasts chasing after the silver-armored man, and as for all of the other devilish beasts that were proficient in flight, they hesitated momentarily before charging toward the white balls of light. The devilish beasts that were slower and lagging behind also split up into three groups to pursue their three targets. Han Li had naturally witnessed everything that was taking place behind him, and after ascertaining that Xianxia did indeed still have some trump cards up his sleeve, he heaved an internal sigh of relief before focusing on his own escape. At Han Li's current speed, he was able to cover hundreds of kilometers in the blink of an eye, and before the devilish beasts knew it, they'd been pursuing him for tens of thousands of kilometers. Han Li cast his gaze behind him to find that the three devilish beasts were still only trailing by just over 1,000 feet, so he hadn't opened up much distance between them at all. Further away in the distance, there was an indistinct cloud of black qi that was also surging along in hot pursuit. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. The three high-grade devilish beasts weren't fearsome opponents to him, but if they were to stall him and allow all of the other devilish beasts to catch up, he'd be in deep trouble as he still hadn't recovered to his peak condition. With that in mind, Han Li no longer hesitated as he immediately made a hand seal. All of a sudden, a loud thunderclap rang out behind him, and a pair of translucent wings appeared on his back. He flapped the wings gently, and another thunderclap erupted as he shot forth as an arc of azure and white lightning, disappearing into the distance in a flash. In the next instant, azure and white lightning flashed over 1,000 feet away, and Han Li reappeared before abruptly vanishing on the spot once again. Thus, Han Li flapped his thunderstorm wings with all his might, unleashing his lightning movement technique to its maximal extent. Azure and white lightning flashed, and within the span of just a few breaths, he'd widened the gap between himself and the three devilish beasts by over 1,000 feet. Wu Qi was quite startled to see this, and he immediately became quite flustered and anxious. If he were to allow Han Li to escape right under his nose, only one possible fate could await him at the hands of his master. With that in mind, it abruptly opened its mouth to expel a strange triangular copper mirror. The mirror was yellow in color, and its surface was quite blurry and indistinct. Wu Qi turned around to the other two high-grade devilish beasts before letting loose a low snarl. The devilish falcon and azure wasp exchanged a glance upon hearing this snarl, and both of them seemed rather hesitant. A cold light flashed through Wu Qi's eyes as he let loose a louder, menacing roar. Both the high-grade devilish beasts shuddered before reluctantly opening their mouths to expel two fist-sized beads, one black and one azure, both of which disappeared into the mirror in a flash. The triangular mirror immediately began to emit a low buzzing sound, and at the same time, its surface turned into a black and azure color. Wu Qi was ecstatic to see this, and he tossed the mirror into the air before also opening his mouth to expel a gray bead. The bead revolved around the mirror before also vanishing into its surface, and the mirror began to tremor violently as it emanated gray, black, and azure three-colored light. Wu Qi then thrust a finger toward the copper mirror, and brilliant spiritual light radiated from it as it suddenly emitted a streak of three-colored light. The streak of light was like a dragon rising out of the ocean, encompassing all three devilish beasts in the flash. As for the copper mirror itself, it swayed slightly before also disappearing into the light. Immediately thereafter, the light flashed and covered a distance of 700 to 800 feet in the blink of an eye, hurtling directly toward the arc of azure and white lightning in a wraith-like manner. The three devilish beasts had used this treasure to combine their powers, thereby drastically enhancing their speeds. They were still slightly slower than Han Li, but Wu Qi heaved a long sigh of relief. At Han Li's lowly cultivation base, there was no way that he'd be able to outlast a treasure that was being fueled by magic power from all three of them. As such, it was only a matter of time before they caught up to him. The azure and white arc of lightning flashed through the air amid dull thunderclaps up ahead, while the three-colored light followed along in a wraith-like manner formed behind. The two disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye, and after giving chase for tens of thousands more kilometers, the massive cloud of devilish chi could only stop as the devilish beasts within it had lost sight of their target. Thus, the devilish chi dissipated, and over 30 devilish beasts were left staring at one another as they stood on the spot. A wolf-like devilish beast with the head of a snake suddenly said, "Hiss, hiss, what do we do? That spirit realm being is way too fast for us to keep up with. Even Master Wu Qi is only barely able to remain on his tail. You even need to ask. Of course we keep giving chase. Master Wu Qi gave all of us a tracking plate that shows us everyone's locations, didn't he? We'll be able to track down Master Wu Qi even from millions of kilometers away." A boar-like devilish beast with a pair of extraordinarily long ears replied. "HMPH, at your speed, you might not even be able to catch up to Master Wu Qi within the next century." The snake-headed wolf scoffed as it rolled its eyes with disdain. "What are you trying to say? You're making it sound like you're the only one who can catch up to Master Wu Qi, and all of us are just weighing you down." The boar-like devilish beast appeared to be quite simple and honest, but it was actually quite a cunning being, and it was turning everything on the wolf-like devilish beast with its words. However, this wolf-like devilish beast was one of the most powerful beings in the group to begin with, so it merely chuckled coldly and offered no reply to this. Its attitude naturally drew discontent and animosity from all of the other devilish beasts present. A glittering and translucent little beast with a glazed five-colored body suddenly interjected, "That's enough. Yuan Mang's right. All of us are capable of flying at different speeds, so it would be implausible to expect all of us to be able to catch up to Master Wu Qi. However, it wouldn't be right to leave those three to pursue that spirit race being on their own. How about this? We'll pick the fastest 5 beings among us to continue giving chase, and the rest of us will go back for now and await further orders." There was a hint of a commanding tone in its voice, and surprisingly enough, none of the rowdy and uncouth devilish beasts present offered any objections in response to its proposal. As such, after a further round of arguments, 5 of the fastest devilish beasts in the group were selected to continue giving chase, while everyone else returned the way they'd come. The snake-headed wolf beast and the glazed five-colored beast were naturally among the 5 devilish beasts that continued to give chase, and after shedding the rest of the group, they really were able to travel far faster than they did before. Thus, a collective streak of black light that was over 100 feet in length hurtled through the air in a flash. Azure and white lightning flashed around Han Li's body as he disappeared amid another loud thunderclap. In the next instant, he appeared several thousand feet away before vanishing again. From afar, One could just catch a glimpse of him on one side of the sky before he appeared on the side, then completely disappeared from view after another flash. Not only after the arc of azure and white lightning disappeared from the area, a streak of three-colored light would speed past in a soundless manner before also vanishing after just a few flashes. And Li didn't even have to turn around to know that the three devilish beasts were still several tens of kilometers away, pursuing him with all their might. His brows furrowed slightly as a dark expression appeared on his face. He'd already been flying for half a day with the three devilish beasts trailing behind him, and even though the gap between them was slowly widening, he was still far from being able to throw them off his trail. The devilish chi in the Golden Devil mountain ranges severely restricted the spiritual sense of outsiders, yet it only worked to enhance the spiritual sense of devilish beasts, allowing them to detect everything up ahead for hundreds of kilometers with ease. At this rate, he most likely wouldn't be able to shake off these three devilish beasts, even if he were to lead them on a chase for half a month. However, there were only less than 10 days before the Golden Devil mountain ranges were due to be closed, so he didn't have that much time to waste. Furthermore, there were holy-grade devilish beings in these mountain ranges, and the longer he kept this up, the greater the chance that one of them would be drawn to the scene. And Li naturally wasn't going to continue to stack the odds against himself. On top of that, after such an extended period of flight, he'd expended a lot of the divine devilbane lightning in his body already, and he wouldn't be able to maintain his thunderstorm wings for too much longer. In contrast, the three devilish beasts were able to draw upon the power of that strange mirror to keep up this speed for an indefinite amount of time. Thankfully, the pack of devilish beasts that he was most wary of had already been completely thrown off his trail. As such, as time gradually passed by, the killing intent in hand, Li's heart grew more and more pronounced. However, he merely continued to fly through the air at the same speed, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. After flying for a while longer, a vast expanse of gray mist suddenly appeared up ahead. It wasn't exactly very dense, but it appeared from afar that it covered quite a massive area. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and lightning flashed around his body as he plunged headfirst into this mist without any hesitation. Following a loud thunderclap, Han Li appeared at a certain point within the mist, and he immediately surveyed his surroundings as blue light flashed through his eyes. After ascertaining that there weren't any devilish beasts lurking nearby, he flipped his hand over to produce a purple talisman. He plastered the talisman to his own body, and it transformed into a ball of a spiritual light that enshrouded his entire body. At the same time, silver runes were churning incessantly within the ball of light. The silver light then disappeared in a flash, and Han Li vanished along with it. He had just used the high zenith invisibility talisman to conceal himself. After using the talisman, he could even fool early body integration stage beings, let alone the three spatial tempering stage devilish beasts behind him. If it weren't for the fact that using the talisman would severely hamper his speed, thereby making him unable to escape from the three devilish beasts' sensory range in a short time, he would have already used it to assist in his escape. Thus, he hid himself within a cloud of relatively denser mist, and remained completely stationary as he cast his gaze toward the direction that he'd just come from with an expression of rapt focus on his face. A distance of several tens of kilometers was nothing to the three devilish beasts, and they covered it virtually in the blink of an eye. As such, the three-colored streak of light arrived at the border of the sea of gray mist almost as soon as Han Li hid himself within it. A ball of spiritual light flew through the air before revealing itself to be a triangular copper mirror. Right at this moment, the three-colored light faded, leaving Wu Qi's trio standing in its wake. What happened? How did that man's aura suddenly disappear in this area? The massive devilish falcon asked with a hint of bewilderment flashed through its green eyes. Did he manage to escape? The azure wasp chimed in a confused manner. There's no way that he could have escaped. Even the holy grade masters wouldn't have been able to cover such a vast distance in such a short time, Wu Qi concluded as he cast his gaze toward the sea of mist up ahead with a dark expression on his face. Oh, so that must mean that he's using some kind of concealment ability, or he has some other treasure that can conceal his aura, the devilish falcon analyzed upon hearing this. That's most likely the case. It looks like he knows that he won't be able to escape from us, so he's just going to stop here and make a final stand. A sinister smile appeared on Wu Qi's face as he spoke. That man's cultivation base is even lower than mine. He's just going to bring certain death to himself. Both the Azure Wasp and the Devilish Falcon chuckled coldly upon hearing Wu Qi's words. HMPH, don't get complacent. He must have some tricks up his sleeve for him to dare to do this. I've refrained from telling you this, but the young master died a few days ago, and this man is most likely the killer. Otherwise, Master wouldn't have been infuriated to the point that he'd deploy us at such an important juncture. Wu Qi harumphed coldly as the sinister smile vanished from his face. What, this man killed the young master? Is that true? The Azure Wasp exclaimed. The young master possesses a similar cultivation base to this man, but Master had given him several special treasures, so there's no way that man could have killed him unless he's far more powerful than his cultivation base suggests. In that case, he really will be a rather troublesome opponent that we have to exercise caution against, the Devilish Falcon said in a rather grave voice. Even if there's some risk involved, it's a risk that we must take. If we can't kill or capture this man, I'm sure you too are well aware of the consequences that await us when we have to face Master's wrath, Wu Qi said in a grim manner as he suddenly grabbed onto his two massive horns and detached them from his own head. He then swung them through the air, and they transformed into a pair of shimmering black war hammers. In conjunction with his burly frame and his suit of black metal armor, the pair of war hammers gave him an extremely menacing appearance. After hearing Wu Qi's words of warning, a hint of fear flashed through both the Black Falcon and the Azure Wasp's eyes. The Devilish Falcon then immediately let loose a sharp cry and flapped its wings as it hovered on the spot. Yellow light radiated in all directions, and its body transformed into that of a tall and thin yellow-robed man in the blink of an eye. The man was holding a white bone spear in one hand and a shimmering golden buckler in the other. The bone spear had a layer of black flame surging all over it, and the sound of indistinct ghostly howls could be heard emanating from it. As for the buckler, there was a giant devilish image of a creature with 3 heads and 6 arms emblazoned on its surface, and its round edge seemed to be very sharp. Meanwhile, a low buzzing sound rang out from within the Azure Wasp's mouth, and at the same time, its transparent wings began to tremble and blur. An incredible scene then ensued in the next instant. Azure light swirled all over the giant wasp's body, following which countless balls of light surged forth in a frenzy from its wings, covering the entire area in a radius of over 100 feet. Wu Qi and the yellow-robed man's expression changed slightly in unison as they hurried back away, seemingly quite wary of these balls of light. The balls of light then flashed and transformed into egg-sized azure wasps that were the spitting image of their creator, except shrunk down significantly, of course. Qingzhen, your 1,000-wasp avatar technique seems to have become far more potent. Last time I saw you use this ability, you were still unable to manifest so many devilish wasps, the yellow-robed man said in a slow voice as he appraised these smaller azure wasps. That's because I reached a higher level of this cultivation art not long ago. Not only can I summon more avatars now, each of them is far more powerful than the individual wasp avatars I could summon in the past, the giant wasp replied in a smug manner. That's very good. In that case, we'll have a better chance of hunting down our target. Qingzhen, you get these avatars to lead the way, and we'll search through this sea of mist. That man is most likely hiding in here, Wu Qi chortled with glee as he slammed his war hammers together before him. The giant wasp nodded upon hearing this, and despite the fact that it didn't seem to have issued any verbal instructions, the hundreds of wasp avatars around it converged into an azure cloud before disappearing into the sea of mist. Wu Qi's trio then conversed with one another through voice transmission for a short while, before finally following the swarm of wasps into the mist. After flying for a certain distance, the wasps up ahead transformed into azure flowers that shot forth in all directions. Meanwhile, the giant wasp itself wasn't moving very quickly, to the extent that it was even lagging behind Wu Qi and the yellow-robed man. However, these two devilish beasts seemed to have already grown accustomed to this, and they weren't fazed at all. This 1,000-wasp avatar technique was a very powerful and versatile technique, but after unleashing it, the giant wasp's cultivation base would be reduced by half, so it was naturally proceeding with extra caution. The devilish wasps searched through the entire nearby area before slowly continuing onward. The entire sea of mist only extended for under 100 kilometers, so it really wasn't very large. After just 15 minutes, the 3 devilish beasts had almost reached the halfway mark, yet they still didn't discover their target. As time passed, Wu Qi's expression gradually darkened, as did the expressions on the faces of the other two devilish beasts. After a while longer, just as the swarm of wasps was flying toward a patch of relatively denser mist, a streak of golden light suddenly flashed within the mist from several hundred feet away, slicing one of the nearby devilish wasps in half in a flash. Immediately thereafter, a golden shadow emerged from that patch of mist, then fled in another direction at an astonishing speed. The giant azure wasp was elated to see this, and it immediately yelled to its avatars, "There he is, get him." A loud buzzing sound rang out from the nearby area, as all of the wasp avatars transformed into countless azure flowers that hurtled through the air. Meanwhile, Wu Qi and the devilish falcon exchanged a rather peculiar glance with one another, but they also quickly flew through the air. A gust of black devilish winds erupted into the heavens amid a resounding boom, and it also set off in pursuit of the golden shadow in the distance. As for the giant wasp, it was still flying on ahead at its normal speed. Thus, both the golden shadow and the gust of black winds disappeared mere moments later. The giant wasp blinked its compound eyes upon seeing this, and it suddenly stopped on the spot, looking as if no longer wanted to continue onward. Right at this moment, a streak of golden light suddenly erupted from the gray mist above it before piercing through the air rapidly toward its head. The golden light was extremely bright, and even before it reached the giant wasp, a burst of astonishing spiritual pressure came crashing down upon it. The azure wasp was the weakest among the trio in terms of cultivation base, and this disadvantage had been significantly exacerbated after it had unleashed its 1,000-wasp avatar technique. Thus, a hint of fear flashed through its eyes at the sight of the oncoming streak of golden light. However, strangely enough, the devilish wasp remained completely still, displaying no intention to take evasive measures. Just as the golden light was about to puncture the azure wasp's head, spatial fluctuations suddenly erupted, and a white bone spear abruptly appeared before it. A layer of black flame surfaced over the entire length of the bone spear, and it repelled the streak of golden light amid a crisp clang. The golden circled around and revealed itself to be a shimmering golden spear. Immediately thereafter, a ball of yellow light appeared before the azure wasp, within which a humanoid figure could be seen. It was none other than the yellow-robed man, who'd clearly already gone on ahead. He raised a hand and waved it through the air, drawing the bone spear into his grasp in a flash. Meanwhile, a golden buckler appeared in his other hand, and he held it before his body. At this moment, he was staring at the cloud of gray mist, where the golden light had shot forth from with a peculiar look on his face. All of a sudden, black light flashed in the air above the cloud of gray mist, and two round table-like black shadows abruptly appeared before crashing down with ferocious might. Gale force winds swept through the air as a loud boom rang out. The black shadows flashed past, and the space in its wake twisted and warped as if it were about to be torn open. A burst of invisible had also instantly dispersed the mist down below, revealing a humanoid figure that was emanating faint golden light. The humanoid figure seemed to be panicked by the fact that its location had been exposed, and it hurried launched a pair of golden fist projections through the air toward the black shadow up above, then immediately fled the scene as a streak of golden light. "Where do you think you're going?" A deafening roar suddenly erupted, following which the two black shadows abruptly crashed down from above. They pulverized the oncoming golden fist projections, then swayed and revealed themselves to be a pair of massive black war hammers. The two war hammers rotated in the air, and two enormous bursts of suction force appeared out of thin air, encompassing an area in a radius of over 200 feet down below. Thus, the golden humanoid figure only managed to fly through the air for just over 100 feet before it became extremely slow and sluggish. At this moment, the yellow-robed man abruptly swept an arm through the air, and the bone spear in his hand shot forth as a streak of black light, hurtling through the air like lightning. At the same time, the giant wasp's abdomen suddenly twitched, and an azure thread shot forth from its tail end. The streak of black light and the azure thread reached the golden humanoid figure in a flash, and the azure thread appeared to be quite mundane, but it outsped the bone spear before reaching its target first. The thread then disappeared into the golden humanoid figure's body in a flash, and the latter shuddered as the golden light emanating from it dimmed, following which a foul odor before to waft through the air. In the next instant, the streak of black light also punctured through the golden humanoid figure's dantian in a flash. A layer of black flames instantly erupted over the golden humanoid figure's body, completely inundating it in the blink of an eye. At this moment, One of the giant black war hammers also crashed down from above and struck the black flames amid an earth-shattering boom. The golden humanoid figure was instantly pulverized into nothingness, while the black flames were also snuffed out by the immense force of the impact. Spatial fluctuations erupted in the air several hundred feet overhead, and Wu Qi emerged out of thin air with a sinister smile on his face as he cast his gaze downward. The yellow-robed man and the azure wasp also wore smiles on their faces upon seeing this. This was a plan they'd established before venturing into the Sea of Mist. They were going to expose the enemy using the swarm of wasp avatars, then use the giant wasp itself as bait to lure out their target. As expected, the plan worked splendidly, and they'd managed to slay this enemy with minimal effort. However, just as the three of them were heaving a sigh of relief, an azure longsword suddenly shot forth out of thin air from several tens of feet behind the azure wasp without any premonition. As a spatial tempering stage, high-grade devilish beast, the azure wasp almost immediately sensed what was happening behind it, and its heart jolted with shock as a poisonous stinger abruptly emerged out of its conical tail end. The stinger was around a foot in length, and it tremored as layers of stinger projections whistled through the air to shield its body within. However, the azure longsword merely flashed past without any difficulty, and the giant wasp shuddered as it was sliced cleanly in half. Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D452, letter 1D452, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 2134, letter 1D62E. The two halves of its body plummeted from the sky, and as of the poisonous stinger it had just summoned, that had also been sliced in half without being able to offer any resistance. A ball of green flame suddenly flew out of one half of the giant wasp's body, and a miniature azure wasp could be seen within it. As it flew desperately toward the yellow-robed man, who was the closest ally to it, it yelled in a panicked manner, "Save me, fellow Taoist Ying Tang." At this point, both the yellow-robed man with the name of Ying Tang had naturally also discovered what had happened behind him, and his expression changed drastically as he immediately swept a sleeve through the air. A burst of black chi swept forth from within, attempting to envelop the soul of the giant wasp. However, a cold harumph suddenly rang out from a certain location, and upon hearing this harumph, the yellow-robed man was struck by a sense of intense agony, as if a sharp spike had been driven into his head. He let loose an involuntary howl of agony, and his body plummeted like a bird with broken wings. All of a sudden, a loud thunderclap rang out, following which an azure and white arcs of lightning appeared, and a hand that was as pristine as white jade emerged. The hand flicked its 5 fingers through the air, and a burst of 5 colored flames instantly swept up the yellow-robed man, causing him to decelerate significantly in his descent. During this split-second delay, the 5 fingers on the hand spread open and took on a shimmering golden hue as golden lightning erupted forth, surging directly toward the yellow-robed man's chest. The yellow-robed man immediately turned deathly pale upon seeing this. Even though his spiritual sense was still throbbing with pain, this was an extremely dire situation, so he repressed the agony and forcibly drew upon a wisp of spiritual sense. The golden buckler in his hand immediately flashed before swelling drastically to several times its original size, and a dozen or so strange runes of different sizes appeared on its surface. Having had its powers activated, the buckler completely shielded the yellow-robed man's body behind it. Meanwhile, the splitting headache that the yellow-robed man had been afflicted by was quickly receding, so if he could withstand this attack and save himself, he'd be able to retaliate with a vengeance. Just as these thoughts were racing through his mind, golden light flashed, and the golden palm thrust itself toward the buckler without displaying any intention of taking evasive measures. An ear-splitting boom erupted as golden flashed, and the golden palm screeched through the buckler, then punctured the yellow-robed man's chest in a flash before pulling its devilish core out of its body. Silver light then flashed along the entire arm, and a layer of silver flames swept forth to instantly envelop the yellow-robed man's body. The devilish falcon's soul only had a chance to let loose a wail of anguish before it was incinerated into nothingness. At this moment, the azure and white arc of lightning faded, and a winged young man appeared in an expressionless manner before slowly withdrawing his arm. In the hand attached to that arm was a shimmering black devilish core. This young man was naturally none other than Han Li, and the soul of Azure Wasp was petrified upon witnessing this harrowing development. As such, green light flashed from its body, and it immediately tried to escape in another direction. However, it was already too late. A derisive sneer appeared on Han Li's face as he swept the sleeve of his other arm through the air. A burst of gray light immediately surged forth from within to capture the soul of the azure wasp. The miniature azure wasp let loose a muffled groan before it was crushed into specks of green light by the divine essence-effused light, then disappeared into nothingness as well. In the instant that the soul of the azure wasp was destroyed, the swarm of devilish wasp avatars all self-detonated several thousand feet away. Thus, the giant azure wasp and the devilish falcon were slain in virtually the blink of an eye, and Han Li paid no heed to the devilish falcon's plummeting body as he cast a frosty gaze toward the final high-grade devilish beast. Wu Qi had naturally witnessed everything that had just taken place, and he was struck by a sense of astonishment and foreboding. The giant wasp and the devilish falcon possessed inferior cultivation bases compared to his, but there definitely wasn't a significant disparity. However, this man had slain them with ease in the blink of an eye, and not even their souls had managed to escape. How could he not be struck by fear in the face of such a fearsome foe? It was indeed true that he'd only managed to kill the two devilish beasts so easily, as he'd caught them off guard with a sneak attack. But under the same circumstances, Wu Qi knew that he definitely wouldn't have been able to slay those two companions of his so easily. At the same time, he was feeling rather perplexed. Just what was that golden shadow that lured them out, only to be killed with a single hammer strike? They'd clearly sensed powerful spiritual pressure emanating from it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been fooled so easily. In any case, if he were to engage this man in battle, death would most likely be the fate that awaited him, so it was a much better idea to wait for reinforcements to get here before killing this man. If worst came to worst, they'd just have to break the agreement that had been made with the outside world and set up an ambush at the entrance to the mountain ranges in order to kill their target. The top-grade beings of the outside world surely wouldn't venture into the mountain ranges and spark a battle over just a single spatial tempering stage being. Thus, after rapidly processing this series of thoughts, Wu Qi immediately devised a strategy. At the same time Han Li cast his gaze toward him, he made a grabbing motion with both hands, and the two metal war hammers abruptly shrank down to their original size before returning to his grasp. He then opened his mouth to produce that triangular copper mirror before quickly pointing a finger at it. A ball of light erupted from the surface of the mirror amid a low buzzing sound, and the ball of light instantly descended from above. A peculiar scene then unfolded. As the ball of light descended, Wu Qi's burly figure suddenly disappeared. Immediately thereafter, the copper mirror tremored slightly, and it also disappeared into thin air, leaving an afterimage in its wake. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, seemingly taken aback by this development. However, his expression then immediately darkened, and blue light quickly flashed through his eyes. It was as if a vortex had appeared in his pupils, and if there were any onlookers present, they'd be struck by the feeling that those eyes were trying to suck the souls out of their bodies. All of a sudden, Han Li seemed to have caught sight of something, and he abruptly made a hand seal before pointing two fingers toward his glabella. A ball of black chi appeared, then manifested an inky black eyeball. It was none other than his law destruction eye. As soon as the demonic eye appeared, inky black light swirled within it, and there seemed to be runes surging incessantly within the pupil. A beam of black light that was around as thick as a human finger shot forth from within the law destruction eye, then also disappeared into thin air. Moments later, an earth-shattering boom rang out from a certain location over 1,000 feet away, following which a black ball of light emerged amid violent spatial fluctuations. A dull thump rang out as Wu Qi's burly figure stumbled out of thin air, and an expression of shock and fury appeared on his face. Almost at the exact same moment, a loud thunderclap rang out above it, following which an azure and white arc of lightning appeared with a humanoid figure visible within it. Wu Qi didn't even get a chance to regain his bearing before his heart sank, and he looked up as he reflexively swung his arms upward, sending his two war hammers hurtling directly toward the humanoid figure overhead. At the same time, spiritual light flashed from his chest, and a blue flag flew forth, then swayed before forming a blue light barrier that shielded his body within. Meanwhile, black light flashed from Wu Qi's body as he rushed back like an arrow, trying to open up some distance between Han Li and himself. However, Han Li certainly wasn't going to allow him to get his way. Azure and white lightning exploded in the air above, and the lightning suddenly took on a silver hue. Immediately thereafter, His body swelled drastically in size as he transformed into a massive azure bird that was several tens of feet long. The huge bird spread open its wings before swooping down with thick arcs of silver lightning surging all over its body. It was traveling at an extraordinarily fast speed, and it caught the oncoming pair of black war hammers with its talons in a flash. A rumbling thunderclap erupted, and the two war hammers were crushed amid a wail of anguish as if they were mere papier-mâché structures. In the next instant, the giant talons continued onward without pause, crashing into the blue light barrier around Wu Qi's body. Surprisingly enough, the seemingly ordinary light barrier suddenly flashed with blue light before turning into a barrier that seemed to be crystalline in nature. The arcs of silver lightning and the immense power of the giant bird's talons were all completely nullified, without being able to damage the barrier in the slightest. Wu Qi heaved a long sigh of relief upon seeing this, and a faint smile appeared on his face. However, before he had a chance to do anything else, a sharp cry suddenly rang out from outside the light barrier, following which the azure bird's beak transformed into streaks of azure light that came crashing down in a flash. 3 resounding booms rang out from the same spot on the light barrier, followed by a crisp crack, and the crystalline light barrier was shattered into specks of blue light from the point where the bird had pecked it. Arg! Wu Qi was stunned to see this, and he hurriedly waved both of his arms upward in unison. Countless black claw projections were sent hurtling through the air, creating a net of claw projections that shielded it from above. However, the massive azure bird merely pecked down with its beak again, and another streak of azure light disappeared into the claw projections in a flash. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D69B, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D680, letter 1D604, letter 1D556, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D560, letter 1D46. All of a sudden, silver lighting erupted in a frenzy, and the net of claw projections was torn apart with ease, following which the streak of azure light abruptly vanished like an illusion. Wu Qi shuddered as his flailing arms fell still, and he looked down to discover that a gaping hole had been punctured into his chest, within which silver light was flashing incessantly. An expression of incredulity and horror appeared on his face, yet before he even had a chance to cry out, arcs of silver lightning erupted from the puncture wound on his chest, completely inundating his body in a flash. Loud thunderclaps rang out for a long while before finally ceasing, and at this point, Wu Qi's body and soul had both been completely destroyed. The only thing that remained was that strange triangular copper mirror. The massive azure bird's body abruptly shrank as it reverted back to its human form amid a flash of spiritual light. After casting his gaze toward the copper mirror, Han Li raised a hand, and a burst of suction force erupted as he drew the treasure into his grasp. He took a cursory glance at the treasure, but was unable to glean much from such a rushed inspection. However, he was quite interested in this mirror. It was able to combine the magic powers of multiple beings and escape into space of its own accord, so it was clearly no ordinary treasure. Han Li waved a hand through the air, and the mirror abruptly disappeared amid a flash of yellow light. It appeared it had been worth expending some magic power to slay these devilish beasts. With that in mind, Han Li didn't remain here for any longer as he flew deeper into the sea of mist as a streak of azure light. Round an hour later, a gust of black devilish winds surged forth from afar. The devilish winds then vanished right before the sea of mist to reveal a group of 5 devilish beasts. The 5-colored little beast cast its gaze toward the sea of mist and said, "This is where the 3 of them disappeared." Wary expressions also flashed through the eyes of the other 4 beasts upon hearing this. How could the 3 of them have disappeared one after another in such a short span of time? Could it be that they encountered some other difficulties along the way? The snake-headed wolf beast speculated. I'm not too sure about that, but in any case, we have to focus and be more cautious from here onward, the small beast replied in an implacable voice with a shake of its head. Yes. The other 4 devilish beasts all lowered their heads in a respectful manner. Immediately thereafter, the gust of devilish winds was swept up once again as all 5 beasts traveled into the sea of mist. A few minutes later, all 5 devilish beasts reappeared at the location where Han Li had slain Wu Qi, and they were inspecting their surroundings with bewilderment in their eyes. One of the devilish beasts, which bore a strong resemblance to a duck with a single white horn on its head, abruptly flew downward as a streak of white light, vanishing from view in the blink of an eye. This naturally drew the attention of the other devilish beasts, and all of them exchanged glances with one another. Moments later, the devilish chi down below surged, and the duck-like creature reappeared. It had returned holding fist-sized fragments of bull horns in both of its webbed feet. These are fragments of the spirit horns on Master Wu Qi's head. How could they have been shattered? Could it be that they really have perished? A tiger-like devilish beast murmured with a stunned expression on its face. It looks like the three of them really have been killed. Are we really chasing after such a powerful target? The small five-colored beast mused as its eyes narrowed. What do we do next? That outsider's completely disappeared, and there's no way we'll be able to track him down, the snake-headed wolf said with a dark expression. HMPH, there's no way we'd continue this chase even if we could track him down. If he could kill Master Wu Qi and the others, then we'll be no match for him either. Let's go back the way we came, the five-colored beast immediately decided. But that's not going to end well for us either. Master will definitely be very displeased, another devilish beast countered in a wary voice. Not to worry, it's not like we've actually just given up. We're going to gather everyone else, then set up an ambush at the exit. If that man wants to leave the Golden Devil mountain ranges, then we'll definitely encounter him again sooner or later, the five-colored beast replied after a brief hesitation. The four other devilish beasts offered no objection, and all of them seemed to be quite obedient toward the small five-colored beast. Thus devilish winds were swept up again, and the five devilish beasts returned the same way they'd come. At this point, Han Li was already countless kilometers away, flying through the air while appraising his surroundings in a cautious manner. Even though he'd successfully escaped from his pursuers, his brows were still slightly furrowed with concern. After fleeing for over half a day, he'd completely diverged away from his original route, so he'd have to take another path if he wanted to return to the exit of the Golden Devil mountain ranges. However, doing so would take him over unfamiliar territory, and it'd also incur the risk of encountering new devilish beasts. However, compared with facing hundreds of mid-grade and high-grade devilish beasts at once, this risk was a much more preferable one for him to take. Of course, the possibility that devilish beasts could blockade the exit did flash through his mind, but he quickly disregarded that train of thought. As long as no holy-grade devilish beasts appeared in his path, he'd be able to escape from them regardless of whether he was to use his high zenith invisibility talisman or simply rely on his superior speed. The most important thing now was whether Xianxia had also managed to shake off her pursuers. If she were to perish in these mountain ranges, then the heavenly devilish armor would have to remain in disrepair for the foreseeable future. However, this wasn't something that he could control either. Furthermore, from the methods that Xianxia had employed to escape from those devilish beasts earlier, it seemed that she still had many more trump cards up her sleeve, so she'd most likely be fine. As for that silver-armored man, Han Li would like nothing better than for him to die in these mountain ranges. With that in mind, Han Li refocused his attention on his own journey. Thus, the streak of azure light increased in brightness and also sped up significantly, disappearing into the distance after just a few flashes. Han Li continued alone on his journey for a day and a night, encountering a few low-grade devilish beasts, all of which were slain by him with ease. At present, Han Li was currently flying over a stretch of small hills, and most of the hills down below had been obscured within black devilish chi, with only a series of summits visible from above. All of a sudden, an earth-shattering boom erupted in the distance, causing the entire nearby area to vibrate audibly. Han Li was naturally quite startled by this massive commotion, and he came to an abrupt halt before turning toward the direction where the sound had come from. There he discovered a vast expanse of crimson fiery clouds. Within those fiery clouds, balls of scorching white flames emerged before exploding to form waves of crimson flames. Dull explosions rang out one after another, and it seemed that there was no end to them. Han Li's eyelids twitched upon seeing this, and he didn't know what was happening over there, but it was quite clear that no ordinary spatial tempering stage being would have been able to create such an astonishing spectacle. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes a few times, and after a brief hesitation, he continued to fly in the same direction, even speeding up slightly on this occasion. He had reaped many rewards from this trip to the Golden Devil mountain ranges already, and all he wanted to do now was to get out of this place as quickly as possible. As such, he wasn't interested in engaging in any activities that could incur unnecessary risks. However, much to Han Li's surprise, despite his efforts to avoid trouble, trouble simply insisted on knocking on his door. After flying through the air for several thousand feet, spiritual light suddenly flashed from within the fiery cloud, following which 4 streaks of light suddenly shot forth. The 4 streaks of light were led by a dazzling purple ball of light that was flying directly toward Han Li at an alarming speed, and the 3 streaks of light behind it were respectively green, silver, and crimson in color. Even though they were slightly slower than the purple streak of light, they were still traveling extremely quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they were only just over 1,000 feet away from Han Li. Han Li's expression faltered upon seeing this, and he wasn't sure whether he should evade or travel toward these streaks of light. However, he only hesitated for a split second before rustling a sleeve, and a layer of gray light immediately surfaced before him. Immediately thereafter, a clear ringing sound rang out as countless small azure swords appeared in the air around him, all of which then instantly transformed into azure lotus flowers. At the same time, blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, thereby allowing him to identify what it was that was flying within the purple light, and the sight that he was greeted by immediately brought a peculiar expression to his face. Within the purple light was a strange creature with a green face and 4 limbs that consisted of purple roots. The creature was over 20 feet tall with a set of mundane and completely expressionless facial features. On top of that, it was wearing a suit of yellow armor that was constructed from what appeared to be dead wood. There were purple runes flashing all over the suit of armor, and a faint medicinal aroma was emanating from its body. That's the immortal Xianxia. Han Li had seen the image of the Xianxia in the Jade slip, and he almost instantly identified the creature as shock and elation welled up in his heart. He originally had no intention of capturing this creature, but it was an entirely different story if the immortal Xianxia were to turn up right on his doorstep. Furthermore, it appeared that the immortal Xianxia hadn't been able to successfully manifest its 4 limbs, which indicated that it hadn't yet recovered from its injuries. It had to have been discovered while it was trying to rest and recuperate, thereby forcing it to flee once again. These thoughts raced rapidly through Han Li's mind, and he instantly made sense of the situation. He didn't even bother to inspect the 3 streaks of light that were further in the distance before making a grabbing motion with one hand. A massive gray hand of light immediately appeared right before the purple streak of light, and the immortal Xianxia remained completely expressionless, but a look of despair had appeared in its eyes. It had clearly seen the massive gray hand up ahead, but it seemed to be unable to change directions as it continued to fly directly toward Han Li. In the end, the immortal Xianxia crashed into the gray hand with a dull thump, and the purple light around its body instantly faded as it was captured before being swept back toward Han Li by a burst of gray light. Thus, Han Li had managed to capture the immortal Xianxia as easily as taking candy from a baby. The immortal Xianxia was brought to Han Li by the burst of gray light that had captured it, and even Han Li himself was startled by how easy the process had been. An elated look then immediately appeared on his face as he swept a sleeve through the air. A dozen or so talismans of different colors immediately shot forth from within before disappearing into the immortal Xianxia's body. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D4E, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D490, letter 1D662. After that, runes of different colors appeared, completely encompassing the spirit medicine within. Stop! 3 enraged cries erupted from within the 3 streaks of light, and it was quite clear that all of them were extremely furious for their prey to have fallen into Han Li's hands. However, Han Li completely ignored them as he flipped his hand over to produce an azure jade vial, and the vial tremored before blasting forth a burst of azure light at his behest, which immediately swept the restricted immortal Xianxia into the vial. The immortal Xianxia had been significantly taller than even Han Li himself, but it was shrunk down drastically to only around half a foot in size before disappearing into the opening of the vial. Han Li then flipped a hand over, and the vial disappeared amid a flash of spiritual light. At this moment, all 3 streaks of light arrived before him almost in unison, and the streaks of light faded to reveal 3 beings that surrounded him from around 300 feet away. Only then did Han Li raise his head to inspect his surroundings, and his face remained completely calm and expressionless. He didn't get a chance to identify who these people were earlier, but had ascertained from the spiritual pressure emanating from their bodies that none of them were body integration stage beings, which was why he'd remained so calm and collected. Oh, it's fellow Taoist Han. It's you. Everything had taken place far too quickly just then, and Han Li's divine essence-effused light had obscured his body, so only then did these 3 beings catch a glimpse of his true appearance, upon which 2 cries of surprise instantly rang out. One of the voices was quite taken aback, while the other was filled with bewilderment and wariness. As for the final being that had crimson light flashing around its body, it raised its hands toward Han Li without uttering a single word, sending two streaks of crimson light hurtling toward him. The streaks of crimson light transformed into a pair of flying swords in a flash, and Han Li's expression darkened as the gray light before him swelled to several tens of feet in height, then swept directly up ahead. The two streaks of crimson light sliced through most of the gray light and were about to puncture through to the other side. However, in the next instant, a black shadow suddenly flashed within the gray light, and a small black mountain projection appeared out of nowhere. The two crimson flying swords struck the projection, only to be repelled as if they'd crashed into an impenetrable fortress. Initially, the pair of flying swords were still flying through the gray light in a fierce manner, attempting to skirt around the mountain projection. But as more and more gray light converged around them, they began to decelerate significantly. At the same time, the crimson light around them dimmed, revealing a pair of longswords that were each several inches in length, and they seemed to possess a high level of spiritual nature. After a while longer, the two swords were completely immobilized by the gray light around them, and only then did the being enshrouded in crimson light falter in a slightly surprised manner. However, the being remained completely unflustered as it let loose a loud cry, following which two dull thumps rang out from within the gray light. The two restricted crimson swords had self-detonated before vanishing as specks of crimson light. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted before the being enshrouded under crimson light, and the two small longswords reappeared out of thin air. Void form. Han Li's eyes abruptly narrowed, and his expression darkened as he stared intently at the humanoid figure within the crimson light. At this moment, he'd also gleaned the appearances of the other two beings, and he discovered that one of them was an elderly man with gray hair, while the other was a ferocious foreign being with a head of green hair. These were none other than the elderly man with the Yan surname, and the green-haired being that he'd last encountered in the Lightning Cloud Pavilion. These two had witnessed Han Li's true power before, so they weren't surprised that the attack unleashed by the being enshrouded under crimson light had been nullified with ease. However, both of them were currently appraising Han Li with indecisive looks in their eyes. As for the figure enshrouded under the crimson light, Han Li had also managed to glean its appearance using his spirit eye ability, and he discovered that this was a beautiful woman in a crimson palatial dress. Even though she'd managed to recover her two flying swords, she still wore a shocked expression, clearly very much taken aback by the power of Han Li's divine essence-effused light. The three of them had surrounded Han Li, and all of them remained silent, but they clearly didn't intend to just let him leave. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he cast his gaze toward the distance. Earth-shattering explosions were still erupting incessantly within the fiery cloud, and the commotion seemed to be even louder than before. However, there were black waves of water erupting from down below, striking up at the fiery cloud from time to time. The fiery cloud and the black waves seemed to be the bane of one another's existence, and their clashes resulted in violent explosions that threatened to tear the entire sky apart. Han Li's eyes flashed upon seeing this, and countless thoughts raced through his mind as he contemplated what to do next. After a brief silence, the elderly man said, "Fellow Taoist Han, I recall that you entered the mountain ranges with Junior Yue. Is he here in the nearby area as well?" "Unfortunately, fellow Taoist Yue was killed not long ago," Han Li replied in a truthful manner as a solemn expression appeared on his face. "He's dead. Can you tell me who killed him?" the elderly man exclaimed in a shocked manner. "During the time of the incident, no one was by his side, so I don't know who the perpetrator is," Han Li replied as his brows furrowed slightly. "Oh, I see." The elderly man's expression darkened significantly, clearly not believing that Han Li was telling the truth. Han Li could only give an internal wry chuckle upon seeing this. It appeared that this old man was of the opinion that he had played a part in Yue Zong's death. However, he didn't have any ties with the elderly man, so he naturally wasn't going to explain anything. As such, he cast his gaze toward the other two beings in a calm manner and asked, "Are you planning to let me leave?" "Why ask a question you already know the answer to? Hand over the immortal Xianxia, and you're free to go," the green-haired being said in a cold voice as a vicious light flashed through his eyes. "Immortal Xianxia, do the two of you bear the same intentions?" Han Li asked with a cold chuckle. The elderly man's expression stiffened slightly, but he didn't say anything. In contrast, a cold light flashed through the woman's eyes as she said in a cold voice, "We don't have much time left. Let's join forces to kill him, then we'll split the immortal Xianxia evenly among us. Otherwise, once that devilish crocodile and giant toad catch up to us, we'll be in trouble." As soon as her voice fell, she rubbed her hands together, and a fan that was embroiled in crimson flames appeared in her grasp amid a flash of crimson light. The fan was only around a foot in size, but the entirety of it was constructed from a glittering and translucent white jade. There were countless crimson runes engraved onto the surface of the fan, all of which were shimmering like scorching flames. All right, getting a third is better than nothing. The green-haired being was quite vicious and violent, but he wasn't an idiot. After quickly assessing the situation, he also decided that joining forces was the best course of action, and he immediately flipped his hand over to produce a small, antiquated cauldron. The cauldron then swelled to several feet in size in the blink of an eye before hovering in front of him. Upon seeing the measures adopted by the other two beings, the elderly man hesitated momentarily before gritting his teeth and also sweeping his sleeve through the air. A ball of silver light shot forth from within, revealing itself to be a shimmering silver seal. It was only around an inch in size when it had first appeared, but it then swelled drastically to several tens of feet. At the same time, howling winds and loud thunderclaps erupted from it, and thus the three-way alliance was complete. Han Li's lips twitched upon seeing this, and he heaved an internal sigh. These three beings were all at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage, so they definitely wouldn't be much slower than him. Hence, trying to escape from them wouldn't be a feasible option. The only way to get out of this situation would be to defeat or kill all three of them. This was something he'd already realized as soon as he'd captured the immortal Xianxia. As such, he wasn't flustered in the slightest in the face of his current situation, and he even seized the initiative by unleashing the first attack. He waved an arm through the air, and the small black mountain projection sent waves of gray light hurtling toward the elderly man. At the same time, the small mountain swelled to several hundred feet in size before descending with devastating might. The elderly man's heart jolted with shock, and he immediately flew back in retreat while pointing a finger at the silver seal before him. The seal let loose a faint ringing sound, and it also expanded to several times its original size before rising up to meet the oncoming mountain. An earth-shattering boom rang out as a ball of scintillating light exploded from the underside of the mountain. The entire heavens tremored violently as invisible shockwaves erupted in all directions as a result of the clash. The silver seal was quite a powerful treasure, yet it certainly couldn't compare with the divine essence-infused mountain that had been refined twice already. As such, it was only able to stop the divine essence-infused mountain in its tracks for a split second before it was shattered by the mountain's extraordinary weight. Thus, the massive mountain continued to crash downward, while sending a vast expanse of gray light surging toward the elderly man. The old man's expression changed drastically as he opened his mouth to expel a thin white veil. The veil fluttered through the air before transforming into a white cloud that drifted upward. At the same time, white light flashed past the elderly man's face as he flicked his 10 fingers through the air in rapid succession, sending incantation seals of different colors disappearing into the cloud. As soon as the massive black mountain struck the cloud, most of its power was nullified as if it had struck a massive cotton ball. The white cloud tremored upon impact, but it was able to keep the mountain at bay, much to Han Li's surprise. During this brief delay, the green-haired being and the woman in the palatial dress also sprang into action. The green-haired being opened his mouth to blast forth a ball of green chi onto the cauldron before him, and it let loose a faint ringing sound as its lid flew off of its own accord. In the next instant, a burst of light erupted from within the cauldron before proliferating through the air. Heaven and earth dimmed slightly as a result, and gusts of dark yellow winds were swept up before transforming into several yellow wind dragons that pounced directly toward Han Li. As for the woman in the palatial dress, she gently waved her fan through the air, and the runes on its surface flashed as countless balls of crimson flames erupted from it in a frenzy, all of which also hurtled directly toward Han Li. Han Li remained completely expressionless as he appraised the oncoming attacks. At the same time, he flipped his hand over to reveal a shimmering azure cauldron of his own amid a flash of azure light. It was none other than the Heaven Void Cauldron. Immediately thereafter, he opened his mouth to expel a silver fireball, which instantly transformed into a silver fire raven that was around a foot in size. Go, Han Li commanded as he swept a sleeve through the air. The small azure cauldron shuddered, and it rose up as its lid abruptly disappeared. A piercing ringing sound that erupted directly into the heavens rang out from within the cauldron, and all of the images of beasts and birds carved onto its surface became blurry and indistinct. Brilliant azure spiritual light erupted, and a series of giant beasts and monstrous birds appeared around the small cauldron. All of them then let loose ferocious roars as they pounced toward the oncoming yellow-winged dragons. Thus, both sides clashed in a fierce battle, and they seemed to be rather evenly matched. Meanwhile, the silver fire raven spread its wings and flew directly toward the oncoming crimson fireballs. It was quite obvious even at first glance that these crimson fireballs weren't comprised of ordinary flames. The woman in the palatial dress also wore a relaxed expression on her face, seemingly immensely confident in the power of the crimson fan in her hand. However, in the next instant, her expression abruptly changed drastically. Just as the silver fire raven was about to charge headfirst into the flurry of fireballs, it suddenly let loose a clear cry as it spread its wings wide open, and it began to expand at an alarming rate as if it were a silver bird-shaped balloon. 10 feet, 30 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet. In the blink of an eye, the silver fire raven had swelled to around 300 feet in size, and there were specks of white intermingled within its silver feathers, yet also silver runes shimmering within those white specks. Looking at it from afar, it was like a shimmering silver phoenix that one didn't dare to directly appraise. Han Li was also rather surprised to see this. He knew that the spirit-engulfing fire raven would undergo some kind of evolution after devouring the golden crow true flames, but this astonishing display that it was putting on still took him by surprise. Furthermore, the fire raven hadn't even completely refined the golden crow true flames yet. The spirit-engulfing fire raven possessed a certain level of spiritual nature, so it didn't require any instructions from Han Li before it abruptly flapped its wings forward, sending silver feathers hurtling through the air. From a distance, it appeared as if countless silver arrows had been let loose, and each and every one of them punctured a crimson fireball with unerring accuracy. Loud explosions rang out incessantly as the fireballs began to bulge and warp, then detonate one after another. The woman in the palatial dress was quite stunned to see this, but still managed to keep her cool as she tossed her fan up into the air. She then made a hand seal with her other hand before pointing up at the fan in a solemn manner. Spiritual light flashed, and a crimson pillar of light shot forth from her fingertip before disappearing into the fan. The runes on the surface of the fan surged as they rapidly formed a series of strange images that were constantly transforming. All of the remnant flames from the fireballs that had been destroyed immediately flew in different directions, as if they were about to form fireballs once again. However, right at this moment, the silver feathers that had punctured the fireballs suddenly ignited into fist-sized balls of silver flames. These silver fireballs shuddered before whistling through the air and pouncing toward the crimson flames nearby. All of the crimson flames that came into contact with these silver fireballs disappeared in a flash, having been devoured by the silver fireballs without being able to offer up any resistance. All of a sudden, most of the crimson flames in the air above had been eradicated. The woman's face immediately turned deathly pale upon seeing this. In her desperation, she let loose a delicate cry as she opened her mouth to blast forth a swath of crimson light. However, before the crimson light could even reach the fan, the latter suddenly shattered into countless shards of jade before disappearing on the spot. At this point, the silver flames had already devoured all of the crimson flames in the air. An expression of shock and fury immediately appeared on the woman's face. That crimson fan was no ordinary treasure, and the crimson flames it was capable of unleashing was an extremely devious type of yin flames. For ordinary beings, coming into contact with just a single wisp of those flames would result in them immediately being afflicted by yin poison, even if they were wearing protective treasures. As such, there was no good defense against these flames, and they'd won her many battles in the past. However, on this occasion, these flames didn't even manage to get close to Han Li before they were completely devoured by the strange silver flames that Han Li had unleashed, and this was quite astonishing to the woman in the palatial dress. Furthermore, due to the fact that this was her bonded treasure, she also sustained damage from its destruction, and she threw up a mouthful of blood essence as her face paled even further. However, she didn't dare to take it easy and nurse her injuries as at this moment, the silver fire raven had withdrawn all of its silver feathers and was hurtling directly toward her. The woman wiped the blood from the corner of her lips before raising an eyebrow as she slapped a certain object hanging from her waist. A ball of crimson light immediately shot forth before transforming into a palm-sized red gourd. This was none other than her other most powerful treasure. Immediately thereafter, she began to chant something, and brilliant crimson light erupted from within the opening of the gourd. All of a sudden, waves of crimson liquid gushed forth in a frenzy, sweeping toward the silver fire raven like a massive wave of blood. The crimson wave was emanating a foul odor of blood and gore, and there were wisps of black chi in there that were emitting a frosty, sinister aura. The spirit engulfing fire raven was rather wary of this crimson wave, choosing to refrain from allowing its body to come into contact with this liquid. Instead, it opened its beak, and a burst of white light swept forth. Thus, the white light and the crimson liquid clashed, and as they intertwined in midair, a strange sizzling sound rang out. Part of the crimson wave was immediately evaporated into white steam that dispersed through the air. The white light was formed by none other than the golden crow true flames, and due to the fact that it contained extremely pure yang attribute power, it was very potent against this crimson liquid, which possessed yin attribute properties. White light surged forth relentlessly from within the silver fire raven's beak, just as there was seemingly no end to the crimson liquid gushing out from the gourd. This was a battle of stamina to see whether the white light would evaporate all of the crimson liquid in the gourd, or if the crimson liquid would drown out all of the white light the silver fire rave had to offer. Thus an impasse ensued. However, Han Li only took a cursory glance at the woman before immediately shifting his gaze toward the elderly man and the green-haired being. In the end, a cold light flashed through his eyes as he focused his attention on the green-haired being. All three of these beings were at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage, but it was quite clear that the elderly man possessed the most feeble aura, while the woman seemed to be the most powerful being among them. Thus, the green-haired being was stuck in the middle. If he could kill this being first, then their three-way alliance would be broken. With that in mind, Han Li immediately took a deep breath as a loud thunderclap erupted from behind him. A pair of translucent wings then appeared on his back, and at the same time, golden scales surfaced all over his body amid a flash of golden light. He flapped his thunderstorm wings, and he abruptly disappeared amid a flash of azure and white lightning. At the same time, the azure lotus flower that Han Li was standing on transformed into over 100 streaks of azure sword chi, splitting up into two groups that shot forth toward the elderly man and the woman in the palatial dress. Both of their expressions changed at the sight of the oncoming streaks of azure sword chi, and a silver disc immediately shot forth from the old man's body, before transforming into a dozen or so shimmering silver light barriers that kept the oncoming sword chi at bay. Meanwhile, the woman in the palatial dress opened her mouth to expel a plume of crimson threads, which transformed into vibrant red needles that were as thin as strands of hair. Loud clangs rang out in rapid succession as the thin needles clashed with the other wave of sword chi, and red and azure light flashed incessantly. Thus, both the woman and the elderly man temporarily distracted by the streaks of sword chi, thereby preventing them from being able to focus their attention anywhere else. In the instant that Han Li had disappeared, the green-haired being had already been struck by a sense of foreboding. As such, he immediately made a hand seal, and brilliant yellow light erupted from his shoulder as a yellow copper halberd appeared in a flash. Almost at the exact same moment, a thunderclap rang out above him, and lightning flashed as an azure humanoid figure appeared. The humanoid figure extended a pristine white palm out of one of his sleeves, then abruptly thrust it downward. 5 colored flames surged forth in a frenzy from the fingertips of the white hand, instantly forming a massive 5-colored hand that came crashing down with violent force. At the same time, a rumbling boom suddenly rang out from within the heaven-void cauldron in the distance, following which a plume of azure threads shot forth, then immediately disappeared as soon as they left the cauldron. The green-haired being had been on high alert this entire time, so he was able to detect Han Li with his spiritual sense as soon as Han Li appeared. At the sight of the 5-colored hand descending toward him, he immediately unleashed the yellow halberd he just summoned. The halberd tremored before a burst of piercing yellow light erupted from its sharp tip. It rose up into the air as a streak of yellow light, hurtling directly toward the massive hand in a flash. This copper halberd was a powerful treasure that the green-haired being had obtained from a set of ancient ruins. Not only was it extremely sharp and destructive, it specialized in destroying techniques and abilities. As such, normal abilities would be vanquished by the halberd with ease. However, this five-colored hand was constructed from Han Li's five-colored glacial flames, so it certainly hadn't been manifested from some ordinary ability. After the yellow halberd struck the massive hand, the former was only able to pierce slightly into the five-colored hand before it was unable to advance any further. Immediately thereafter, the five-colored hand swelled drastically in size at Han Li's behest, then closed its huge fingers tightly around the copper halberd. The green-haired being drew a sharp breath upon seeing this, and he immediately circulated the magic power within his body to try and unleash some kind of ability. However, right at this moment, spatial fluctuations suddenly erupted nearby, and a plume of azure threads emerged out of thin air. The azure threads then wound themselves tightly around the green-haired being's body in a flash. The green-haired being was naturally quite startled by this development, and he immediately summoned a layer of scorching green flames over his entire body. Much to his surprise, the azure threads were completely unaffected by those green flames as they continued to immobilize him, and they showed no signs of being incinerated at all. A derisive sneer appeared on Han Li's face as he looked on from above, and he flipped a hand over, upon which a small cauldron appeared over his palm amid a clear ringing sound. He had somehow summoned the heaven-void cauldron back to him from several hundred feet away. He raised his other hand and flicked a finger through the air, following which a faint sound rang out from the cauldron that was akin to the toll of a bell. The azure threads around the green-haired being's body immediately began to glow with bright spiritual light, and then tightened by severalfold, thereby making it impossible for the green-haired being to even move a single finger. As Han Li's cultivation base had progressed, his heaven-void cauldron had also become far more powerful than in the past. At the same time, the massive five-colored hand came tumbling downward from above, and a burst of enormous power suddenly cracked down upon the green-haired being. All of the joints in his body immediately began to crackle and pop loudly, as if he were about to be pulverized by the pressure at any moment. He was only able to last this long as he had mastered a special cultivation art that gave him a very powerful body. If a normal being at the spatial tempering stage were in his place, they would have been crushed into mincemeat already. Even so, the green-haired being was completely unable to take evasive measures, and could only look on as the massive five-colored hand gripped tightly onto his head. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D4 2B, letter 1D5 5 6, letter 1D5 F2, letter 1D6 0 4, letter 1D6 AT, letter 1D5 5 4, letter 1D5 6 0, letter 1D4 6. Following a loud thump, his head was crushed like a watermelon, following which all of the azure threads around him disappeared in a flash, and his headless body plummeted straight toward the ground. After falling for several tens of feet, a muffled thump suddenly rang out from the headless body, following which a ball of green flames rushed out from within. The green fireball then immediately disappeared in a flash. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted over 300 feet away, and the green fireball reappeared with what appeared to be a miniature humanoid figure within it. However, before the humanoid figure had a chance to continue in its escape, azure light suddenly flashed before its eyes. Immediately thereafter, a flying sword that was several feet in length appeared out of thin air, then slashed downward in a lightning-fast motion. The miniature humanoid figure had no time to evade before it was sliced in half amid a howl of anguish, then disappeared as specks of green light. At this moment, Han Li waved a hand from afar, and the flying sword flew back before disappearing into his body. After doing all that, he turned toward the woman and the elderly man with frosty killing intent in his eyes. Both the old man and the woman were scrambling to deal with the barrage of attacks that Han Li had thrown at them, but they naturally still witnessed the green-haired being, who possessed the same cultivation base as them, being slain by Han Li in mere moments. Their hearts immediately sank upon seeing this, and they exchanged a quick glance, only to see their own shock and horror mirrored in each other's eyes. Han Li's eyes narrowed, and the small cauldron above his palm rose up as he prepared to unleash another attack. However, right at this moment, a deafening roar akin to the moo of a cow suddenly rang out in the distant sky. Han Li and his two adversaries all faltered upon hearing this, then turned toward that direction in unison. Thus, they discovered that a clear division had appeared between the fiery clouds and the black waves in the distance, whereas just a few moments ago, they'd been intertwined with one another. Furthermore, both of them were surging toward Han Li's trio at an alarming speed. Han Li's expression immediately changed slightly upon seeing this, as did the expressions on the faces of the old man, and the woman in the palatial dress. Han Li abruptly flipped his hand over, and the small cauldron disappeared in a flash. He then made a hand seal before pointing a finger at each of his two opponents. In the woman's direction, a dull thump rang out as the silver fire raven suddenly exploded and disappeared as specks of silver flames. Meanwhile, the black mountain that was being kept at bay by the white cloud above the elderly man's head also vanished, as if it had been nothing more than an illusion. In the next instant, two balls of light flashed before Han Li, one black and one silver, and the black mountain appeared alongside the silver fire raven, both of which had shrunk back down to their miniature forms. He swept his sleeve through the air, and both the mountain and the bird disappeared. The streaks of azure sword chi that were locked in combat with his opponents. Treasures also hurtled back toward him, then transformed into flying swords that vanished into his body in a flash. Even the small yellow cauldron that had lost its owner, as the green-haired being had just been slain, was drawn into Han Li's grasp. After taking all of those treasures, Han Li flapped his wings and shot forth into the distance as an arc of azure and white lightning, disappearing from view in a flash. Thus, the elderly man and the woman in the palatial dress were left to stare at one another. After witnessing Han Li making easy work of the green-haired being, both of them were extremely wary toward him, and they didn't dare to give chase anymore. The immortal Xianxia was a prized treasure, but certainly not more important than their lives. After exchanging a wary glance, both of them turned toward the oncoming fiery clouds and black waves, and contrasting expressions appeared on their faces. The woman remained standing on the spot, seemingly completely unfazed by the phenomena that were surging toward them from the distance. In contrast, a dark expression appeared on the elderly man's face, and he abruptly pointed a finger at the white cloud-like treasure up above. The cloud immediately tremored before transforming into a swath of white light, and it swept up the old man before fleeing into the distance. The speed at which it was traveling was not much inferior to that of Han Li's after using his lightning movement technique. Thus, the woman was the only one left on the scene. Her brows were furrowed tightly as she looked on at the fiery clouds and black waves in silence. Moments later, the two phenomena appeared above her almost in unison, and they both immediately stopped. The fiery clouds tumbled and churned momentarily before a giant toad's head that was over 100 feet in size poked out from within. "Oh, if it isn't Zhu Ying, did you obtain the immortal Xianxia?" The head belonged to none other than the devilish beast, Zhu Chu. At this moment, its skin was as crimson as fire, and its eyes were tightly shut, but a fist-sized gray bead had appeared on its glabella, and the bead was shimmering with a strange light. The woman wasn't fearful in the slightest as she replied in a respectful manner, "Surely you jest, Uncle Tai. I'm sure you can tell at a single glance whether I'm carrying the immortal Xianxia or not. Besides, if I'd managed to obtain it, I would have fled the scene already rather than continue to stay here." "HMPH, you're just like that sly old fox, Zubai. Both of you look simple and honest, but you're extremely cunning and deceitful on the inside. If I don't ask the question just to confirm the situation, how can I be content to leave? You know what consequences await you if you're lying to me, right?" Zhu Chu harumphed coldly in a menacing manner. This giant toad appeared to have been possessed by his master, the winged devilish beast named Taimo. A black sinister head with a remarkably long mouth that was filled with sharp fangs emerged from the black waves off to the side, and urged in an impatient manner, "Cut the chit-chat. We have to hurry up and go after that immortal Xianxia. You promised that you'll give me that glazed water bead if I help you capture that thing. Hi, you only just progressed to the holy grade recently. You haven't even fortified your cultivation base yet, so you'd better show some respect when talking to me. Otherwise, even if this is only an avatar of mine, I can still teach you a lesson in respect," Zhu Chu retorted in a cold voice. Is that so? Now I really want to see if you're actually capable of that," Hai replied in an uncouth manner as a vicious light flashed through its eyes. Zhu Chu's expression darkened upon hearing this, and the gray bead on its forehead flashed as the fiery clouds around it swelled to staggering heights. Hai didn't back down in the slightest, either, as it opened its cavernous mouth, and the black waves around it immediately erupted into a frenzy. It appeared as if the two of them were about to engage in battle once again. Zhu Chu's face convulsed with fury, but it seemed to be rather wary of Hai, and it forcibly repressed its rage as it said, "Forget it. I'll let you get away with this for now, seeing as I was rather close with your former master. As long as we can capture the immortal Xianxia, I'll naturally give you the glazed water bead. You're not doubting my words, are you?" Not taking into account other matters, you're a holy grade being, so I'm sure you wouldn't go back on your word. Let's keep giving chase. Seeing as Zhu Ying doesn't have the immortal Zoysia, one of those outsiders that just escaped must be in possession of it. How about we ask her who has it? Hai cackled. You think we should ask her? I can confirm that she doesn't have the immortal Zoysia, but do you think she and Zhu Bai will want us to capture the treasure? There are two of us anyway, so we'll just have to split up and pursue a target each. If we do that, there's no way that the immortal Zoysia will slip through our fingers, Ju Chu replied in an indifferent voice. All right, we'll do as you say. I'll go chase that one over there. If I secure the immortal Zoysia, I'll come back here to exchange it for the glazed water bead. Hai chortled with glee before withdrawing its head back into the black waves. Immediately thereafter, a loud rumbling boom erupted as the black waves surged toward the direction that the elderly man had fled in. Ju Chu also spurred its fiery clouds into action, traveling toward the direction that Han Li had escaped to. Thus, the woman in the palatial dress was the only one left on the scene yet again. After witnessing the fiery clouds and black waves disappear into the distance, a wry smile appeared on her face as she murmured to herself, I didn't think that this devilish crocodile would progress to the holy grade so quickly. I have to report this to Father right away. As for that immortal Zoysia, I can only hope that that outsider manages to escape with it. After her voice trailed off, crimson light erupted from her body, and she flew away as a streak of crimson light. Several thousand kilometers away, Han Li was hurtling through the air as an arc of lightning amid a string of dull thunderclaps. Close to 100 kilometers behind him, a loud and relentless rumbling sound could be heard. The entire sky in that direction had been stained a fiery red color, and a vast expanse of fiery clouds was hurtling after him in hot pursuit. Han Li heaved a faint sigh upon seeing this. He didn't have much divine devilbane lightning left, so he wouldn't be able to maintain his thunderstorm wings for much longer. From the startling phenomenon created by his pursuer, it was quite clear that this was no ordinary being, so he most likely wouldn't be able to get away unless he killed the being that was chasing after him. Even so, he still decided to fly on ahead for now. He wanted to lure the enemy further away before facing him in battle, so he wouldn't get mobbed by other enemies as well. Thus, Han Li traveled for close to 100,000 kilometers at his current speed, taking him to an area above a set of several mountain peaks. At this point, he felt that he'd opened up enough distance, and the lightning around his body faded as he abruptly drew to a halt. He turned and cast his gaze toward the oncoming fiery clouds before taking a deep breath. All of a sudden, countless streaks of azure light erupted from his body, all of which then abruptly disappeared in the surrounding space in a flash. Han Li knew that he was being pursued by quite a powerful being, so he decided to set up the Spring Dawn sword formation without any hesitation. Having set up this sword formation, he was confident that he'd be able to kill his enemy as long as it wasn't a body integration stage being. Not long after Han Li had set up his sword formation, the fiery clouds swept into the nearby area amid a burst of incessant rumbling. The fiery clouds obscured the entire sky, and it was as if the god of fire were about to descend upon this world. Hand over the immortal Zoysia, and I'll spare your life. A thunderous voice rang out from within the fiery clouds. Immediately thereafter, a gargantuan creature that was comparable in size to a small mountain emerged before Han Li. Han Li focused his gaze up ahead, and his expression faltered slightly as he discovered that he was facing a giant crimson toad, except it had a pair of massive inky black wings on its back. Letter 1D68F, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D4, 1E, letter 1D430, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D41C, letter 1D698, letter 1D55E. The wings had black chi surging all around them, and they seemed to be projections rather than actual substantial wings. There were also faint golden runes that were flashing within the black chi, giving the projected wings quite a mystical appearance. The giant toad's eyes were tightly shut, but there was a gray bead embedded on its forehead that was flashing with strange gray light, seemingly possessing a high level of spiritual nature. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he appraised the giant toad, and he replied, I do indeed have the immortal Zoysia, and you can take it if you want, but you'll have to hand over your devilish core in exchange. Haha, you sure do dare to talk big, little brat. It's been countless years since anyone dared to say anything like that to me. Seeing as you've made me laugh harder than I have for a long time, I'm going to swallow your soul and savor it carefully after I destroy your body. The giant toad suddenly burst into raucous laughter, as if it had just heard the funniest joke in the world. However, before its laughter had even ceased, red light suddenly flashed from within its mouth, and a crimson shadow shot forth from within. The shadow then appeared before Han Li as if by instantaneous teleportation, then stabbed directly toward his chest. If a normal cultivator were in Han Li's shoes, they'd most likely be completely unable to react to this surprise attack, and the crimson shadow would have instantly punctured their body as a result. However, Han Li was certainly no ordinary being, and he possessed a vast wealth of battle experience. He had activated his Spirit Eye ability well in advance, thereby allowing him to easily track the crimson shadow that would have been close to untraceable to the naked eye for ordinary beings. Using his Spirit Eye ability, he was able to identify the crimson shadow as a long tongue that was around as thick as a human wrist. A dull thump rang out as the crimson shadow was repelled by a small black mountain that had suddenly appeared before Han Li. The giant toad's tongue possessed immense strength, but it was nowhere near powerful enough to move the current divine essence-effused mountain. Ju Chu was rather surprised that its surprise attack had failed, but it immediately chuckled coldly before flapping its black wings. The fiery clouds in the sky seemed to have been drawn toward the massive devilish beast by some kind of mysterious power, and the Ju Chu's body seemed to have transformed into an insatiable black hole. Even with such a vast volume of fiery clouds entering its body, it still displayed no signs of discomfort. However, a grim expression suddenly appeared on Han Li's face for the first time, as he appraised the scenes unfolding before his eyes. When all of the fiery clouds in the surrounding area finally disappeared, Ju Chu had transformed into what appeared to be a massive chunk of crimson searing iron. Its entire body was semi-transparent and emanating piercing fiery light, while it hung in midair like a scorching crimson sun. The sweltering temperatures emanating from its body made the entire area in a radius of several kilometers feel like a scorching furnace, and at such close proximity, the temperatures around Han Li were even more staggering. Even the air was beginning to sizzle, as his surroundings blurred and warped. Most low-grade and mid-grade cultivators would most likely have been incinerated into nothingness by these scorching temperatures already, and even their souls would have been burned to ashes. However, Han Li merely furrowed his brows in response to his current environment before laying a hand onto the top of his own head. A layer of silver flames instantly erupted from the top of his head, surging toward his feet and enveloping his entire body. The scorching temperatures in the surrounding area surged into the silver flames as if it were a magnet for heat, and the area in a radius of over 100 feet around Han Li became cool and refreshing again. Han Li stood on the spot with his arms crossed, appraising the giant crimson toad up ahead in an unblinking manner with an extremely calm look on his face. However, in reality, he wasn't feeling as tranquil and confident as he looked. Fire attribute spiritual power possessed some properties that made it quite potent against devilish powers, so it was extremely rare to see a devilish beast with a pure fire attribute ability, let alone a high-grade devilish beast that had honed its mastery of fire attribute spiritual power to such an astonishing degree. Even so, such an ability alone wasn't anywhere near enough to threaten him. With that in mind, Han Li gave a cold chuckle internally, then suddenly rubbed his hands together before bringing them apart again. A loud rumbling boom rang out as a layer of arcs of golden lightning appeared around his body. These arcs of lightning gradually became thicker, and they proliferated around him in all directions in a frenzy. Thus, a massive spherical net of lighting was formed with Han Li at its very center. At the same time, Han Li flipped both of his hands so that his palms were facing upward, and a series of runes that were shimmering with golden light erupted from his palms, then disappeared into the net of lightning in the surrounding area. An astonishing scene then ensued. In the instant that the runes vanished into the arc of lighting, the latter suddenly shattered amid explosions of golden light, then fused together again in a flash. Thus, a golden halo with a diameter of several tens of feet was constructed in an instant, and Han Li's body was rather blurry and indistinct as he stood at the center of the halo. He then began to chant some kind of incantation, and the halo revolved around him, as the runes in the surrounding area began to emit a ringing sound that quickly became quite piercing and unpleasant to the ears. A loud thunderclap rang out as Han Li's body was revealed, and he made a hand seal with one hand, while a shimmering golden ball hovered around a foot above the palm of his other hand. The ball was completely dull and lusterless, as if it were some kind of ordinary treasure. However, Ju Chu immediately identified what it was as it exclaimed, That's the divine Devilbane Lightning's lightning wheel technique. Hanli chuckled coldly as he moved the 5 fingers of the hand that was situated beneath the golden ball, and the ball immediately began to rotate, as if Hanli were about to unleash at any moment. Juchu was planning to gather more energy in order to prepare an extremely powerful secret technique, but its expression changed drastically upon seeing. It could only abandon its original plans as it rushed through the air, sweeping downward as a pillar of scorching flames. Hanli's lips twitched upon seeing this, and the golden ball in his hand disappeared in a flash. He then suddenly rushed back in retreat, and brilliant azure light erupted as azure lotus flowers suddenly appeared out of thin air. Hanli stepped back onto one of the lotus flowers in a seemingly casual manner and abruptly vanished. The pillar of flame struck the azure lotus flower with a resounding boom, only for the latter to be completely destroyed without offering any resistance, yet the crimson flames continued onward, disappearing into the azure like a sandcastle in the rising tide. The pillar of flames exploded to form a sea of fire that was around an acre in area, and the massive toad reappeared amid a flash of red light. Its eyes were still tightly shut, but the gray bead on its glabella was appraising the specks of azure light up ahead, seemingly in an astonished manner. All of a sudden, Hanli's voice rang out from the surrounding space. "Seeing as you're here, you won't be leaving anytime soon. Have a good taste of my Spring Dawn sword projection." As soon as his voice trailed off, spiritual light flashed in the surrounding air in a radius of over 1,000 feet, and an azure light barrier appeared, encompassing the entire sea of flames within. Juchu had already sensed that something was amiss, and it immediately let loose a thunderous roar upon seeing this, blasting a red pillar of light out of its mouth. The pillar of light struck the azure light barrier and easily punctured through the barrier, but it then disappeared without a trace. Gray light swirled within the bead on Juchu's glabella upon seeing this, and it raised one of its front limbs before swiping it through the air from afar. A resounding boom rang out as vast expanse of red light swept forth from its front limb. The light then formed a massive crimson webbed foot that crashed into the light barrier with ferocious might. The projection was immensely powerful, leaving several streaks of red light in its wake before tearing through a large section of the azure light barrier. However, a vast expanse of inky darkness lay beyond the light barrier, and it seemed to stretch for an unfathomable distance. Juchu immediately unleashed a few more projections toward the same spot without any hesitation, and brilliant azure light suddenly erupted as countless azure lotus flowers suddenly appeared up ahead. In just a few flashes, these lotus flowers had taken up the entire space, and the red projections instantly sank into them as if they'd vanished into quicksand. A shocked expression on Juchu's face upon seeing this, and its crimson front limb instantly swelled to several times its original size, then abruptly split open amid a burst of buzzing. A shimmering red halo then appeared before proliferating outward in a frenzy, instantly expanding to over 100 feet in size as resounding booms akin to rumbling thunderclaps rang out. All of the azure lotus flowers that came into contact with this halo were instantly reduced to nothingness. Thus, the red halo continued onward, looking as if it were going to destroy all of the azure lotus flowers in the area. However, right at this moment, silver flames suddenly flashed in the air above the red halo, following which a silver fire raven that was around a foot in size appeared. The fire raven spread its wings before diving headfirst into the red halo, and the entire halo tremored as a strange crackling noise rang out from its very center. Immediately thereafter, the red halo began to shrink at an alarming rate, reverting back to just several feet in size in mere moments. In the end, all of the red light faded, upon which the silver fire raven reappeared. After devouring the final wisp of residual red light in the air, the fire raven raised its head and let loose a triumphant cry, then immediately disintegrated into specks of silver flames amid a dull thump. Juchu was furious upon seeing this, and it let loose a low roar before abruptly flapping its inky black wings. All of a sudden, gusts of black devilish winds were swept up in the nearby area, and the fierce winds began to revolve around the giant toad. Within the span of just a few breaths, the gusts of wind had become extremely fierce and violent. At the same time, Juchu began to chant something, and flames erupted all over its massive body. The flames were fanned by the gale force winds, combining as one to form an incredible pillar of black winds and red flames that erupted into the heavens. That wasn't the end, either. After the giant toad ceased its chanting, it abruptly opened its mouth to blast forth a purple flying sword. The flying sword swayed before transforming into countless thin palm-sized blades that disappeared into the pillar of fire and wind in a flash. Immediately thereafter, a sharp ringing sound rang out from within the black and red pillar, and countless streaks of purple light suddenly appeared on its surface. These streaks of light then rapidly expanded, and it seemed as if the pillar of wind and fire was growing thicker by the second. Meanwhile, Han Li was standing outside the Spring Dawn sword formation while making a hand seal with one hand, and countless specks of five-colored light were converging from all directions. These specks of light then surged into the azure light barrier in a frenzy, and five-colored light formed by the world's origin, Qi, seemed to stretch for as far as the eyes could see in all directions. Han Li had drawn all of the world's origin Qi in the nearby area to the best of his abilities toward this location, and at this moment, a cold light flashed through his eyes as he made another hand seal. A peculiar scene immediately ensued within the sword formation. The light barrier in the air above blurred slightly before a vine-like plant suddenly sprouted from it in an upside-down manner. When it first appeared, the plant was only several inches in size, but it swelled drastically to around 10 feet in length in just a few moments. Furthermore, it was quickly growing flowers and bearing fruit, materializing a vibrant green gourd in what seemed like the blink of an eye. Right at this moment, countless azure lotus flowers were manifested from the surrounding light barrier, and all of these flowers blossomed in unison before blasting forth sword projections that were each around an inch in length into the gourd. As the sword projections vanished into the gourd in an abundant stream, an extremely faint azure sword insignia suddenly appeared on the surface of the gourd. However, as the vast influx of five-colored light continued to inject itself into the light barrier, then into the gourd along the vine that it was hanging from, the sword insignia became clearer and clearer while flashing with five-colored light. This was none other than the trump card ability that Han Li was able to unleash using the Spring Dawn sword formation, the Origin Qi sword. Only after gathering a vast amount of the world's origin Qi could he just barely unleash this powerful ability, and that was why he hadn't used any of the sword formation's illusionary techniques in the sword formation, choosing instead to focus wholeheartedly on gathering the world's origin Qi. He was already prepared for the possibility that his opponent would take some of the world's origin Qi gathered to be used in its attacks, but much to his surprise, the giant toad merely focused on preparing its own abilities, without paying any heed to the world's origin Qi that he was gathering. As such, the origin Qi sword was manifested in an extremely smooth fashion, and the uninterrupted influx of the world's origin Qi ensured that it would grow at a rapid rate. At this moment, Ju Chu had also sensed the abundance of the world's origin Qi outside the sword formation, and it was stunned by the scenes unfolding before its eyes. However, it had also taken advantage of this opportunity to finish preparing its own secret technique. As such, it suddenly let loose a low cry before pointing up into the air. However, right at this moment, Han Li's voice suddenly rang out within the sword formation, and he only uttered a single word. Slash. The gourd tipped itself over, and light swirled from its opening as a sword of light erupted from within in a flash. The sword was around a foot in length, and it was shimmering with five-colored spiritual light. The five-colored sword slowly descended from above, and Ju Chu was immediately struck by a sense of foreboding at the sight of it. Thus, it launched the black and red pillar before it up into the air in retaliation, and as the powers of wind and fire surged upward, the air twisted and warped violently amid a loud buzzing sound, as if the entire space were about to be torn open. The pillar of wind and fire swept up the five-colored sword of light in a flash, and purple light flashed erratically as an ear-splitting explosion erupted within the pillar. The entire light barrier formed by the sword formation tremored violently, as if it could shatter at any moment. Ju Chu's expression eased as a smile appeared on its face. It had activated all of the latent potential in this body, then drew upon the power of the spirit bead on the giant toad's glabella to unleash this devastating attack, so there was no way that this sword formation could withstand it. Even if its true body were here, it definitely wouldn't want to face this attack. However, a smile had only just appeared on the giant toad's face when its expression abruptly stiffened. A clear ringing sound suddenly rang out from within the pillar of wind and fire, following which it was somehow sliced in half. Five-colored spiritual light flashed, and a massive sword of light shot forth from within. All of the powers of wind and fire nearby seemed to have been struck by an incredible power, and all of it dispersed to reveal the entirety of the giant sword. The five-colored sword turned toward the giant toad, then unleashed a gentle slash that was completely soundless and seemingly harmless as well. However, the gray bead on Juchu's glabella suddenly shattered. Impossible! Juchu let loose a blood-curdling shriek as its eyes sprang open for the first time. Its pupils were completely crimson, and there was blood flowing from his eyes. In the next instant, the giant toad's enormous body parted into two halves without any premonition as a burst of crimson flames surged out of its body in a frenzy, then inundated it in a sea of red flames. The remains of the giant toad were instantly incinerated into nothingness, and the colossal creature vanished in the blink of an eye. The massive toad had been completely powerless in the face of the Origin Chi sword, and even its soul hadn't managed to escape. Azure light flashed up above, and Han Li appeared within the sword formation. He looked down at the scorching flames burning down below and heaved a faint sigh. As expected, drawing upon the power of heaven and earth can create far more powerful attacks than any ordinary secret technique. If it weren't for the fact that there simply wasn't enough of the world's Origin Chi in that devilish Chi passageway, this Origin Chi sword would have most likely been enough to slay that devilish ape as well. In that case, I wouldn't have had to severely weaken my true devil projection by using that profound heavenly treasure, Han Li murmured to himself with a forlorn look on his face. He then cast his gaze down toward the sea of flames underfoot, and he suddenly raised an eyelid before making a grabbing motion. An object flew out of the sea of flames and was drawn into his grasp in a flash. It was a faint blue pouch with several types of different shimmering runes inscribed upon it, indicating that it seemed to be no ordinary object. "Is this a storage pouch?" A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face. After a brief moment of contemplation, the hand that was holding that pouch suddenly turned inky black in color, and bursts of gray light began to erupt from his palm. The pouch was enveloped tightly within the gray light, following which he raised his other hand to cast an azure incantation seal into the pouch. The blue pouch tremored erratically before spiritual light erupted from its opening, and it slowly opened itself up from the inside. Immediately thereafter, a ball of blue light shot forth from within before immediately attempting to fly away into the distance. However, Han Li was already prepared, so he certainly wasn't going to let it get away. A cold harumph rang out as gray light swelled drastically from his hand, sweeping toward the ball of light before completely encompassing it. Gray and blue light intertwined momentarily, and the ball of light reverted to its true form, which was that of a shimmering and translucent blue bead. The bead was around the size of a human thumb, and there was blue light swirling all around it. "Is this an inner core?" Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward the object in a rather bemused manner. "No, but it doesn't seem to be a treasure either." Han Li drew the bead back to him before plucking it between two of his fingers, then holding up to his eyes for closer inspection. However, he wasn't getting any closer to determining just what this object was. "So be it, I'll study it later when I have time. Getting out of here as quickly as possible is my main priority," Han Li murmured to himself as he flipped a hand over to produce a jade box, which he placed the bead into. After that, he looked down at the crimson flames that were still burning down below, and his expression changed slightly. All of a sudden, silver light flashed from the azure light barrier up above, and the spirit engulfing fire raven shot forth before diving headfirst into the sea of flames. The vast expanse of scorching flames was completely devoured by the silver fire raven in the blink of an eye, following which it raised its head and let loose an elated cry. It then spread open its wings and flew toward Han Li before disappearing into his body. After that, Han Li made a hand seal, and the azure light barrier vanished, only to be replaced by several tens of azure lotus flowers. These flowers rotated on the spot before reverting back into 72 small azure swords. Han Li's body swayed, and he flew through the air as a streak of azure light, collecting all of the flying swords in the process. After that, he continued onward and flew away into the distance. Meanwhile, inside a grand palace deep within a certain massive mountain in the Golden Devil mountain ranges, there were two people standing side by side in front of a huge black gate. In the instant that Ju Chu was slain, the expression on the face of azure-robed man among the two suddenly darkened significantly. "Is there something wrong, Brother Tai?" the crimson-robed man beside him asked. "Not really. It's just that one of my avatars has been destroyed," the azure-robed man replied in a truthful manner. At this moment, an elderly man enshrouded in silver light suddenly interjected from nearby. "Avatar. Is it the one that you refined using the devil bone bead?" The azure-robed man didn't seem to like the elderly man much, and he put on a fake smile as he chuckled. Hee, you sure do know a lot about me, Brother Du Yan. If the devil bone bead were to be used on a suitable host, the avatar should be able to unleash no less than 20% to 30% of your powers. There shouldn't be many beings aside from the three of us in the Golden Devil mountain ranges that are capable of destroying such a powerful avatar. The silver-robed old man continued in an innocent manner. That's not necessarily the case. Have you forgotten that when we first crossed over to the spirit realm with the sacred ancestor, there was another being of the same cultivation base that was also teleported here? That devilish ape is no less powerful than the three of us, the crimson-robed man reminded. HMPH, that devilish ape stole the profound heavenly blade segment that the sacred ancestor ordered us to look after. It wouldn't dare to appear in this place again, the silver-robed man harumphed coldly. I wouldn't be so sure of that. I think the devilish ape must have ventured into the outside world to try and find a method to repair the profound heavenly blade segment, so it could then use the treasure to return to our realm, the crimson-robed man countered. You think that ape wants to repair the profound heavenly treasure? Does it still think that we're in the elder devil realm? The truly powerful beings of this realm are no less powerful than the holy patriarchs of our holy realm. If it weren't for the fact that we simply had no choice, our matriarch wouldn't have risked damaging the profound heavenly treasure to force open a passageway into this realm and teleported us here, the silver-robed man replied in a cold manner. There's no use in bickering. I'll be able to find out who destroyed my avatar when I go back and use a secret technique. Besides, the last message my avatar relayed back to me stated that Zhu Bai's daughter seemed to have been in the nearby area as well, the azure-robed man said in an indifferent manner. Zhu Ying was there as well. You're not saying my daughter is capable of destroying your avatar, are you, Brother Tai? The crimson-robed man asked with a hint of a smile on his face. She naturally wouldn't be able to accomplish such a feat on her own, but if she were to join forces with that devilish crocodile that has just reached the holy grade, there's a very good chance that she would have been able to kill my avatar, the azure-robed man replied as he turned to the crimson-robed man beside him. What? That devilish crocodile has reached the holy grade, both the crimson-robed man and the silver-robed man exclaimed in unison. There's no need to be so surprised, fellow Taoists. I'm sure your subordinates will also relay this news to you soon, the azure-robed man said with a wry smile. I see. A slightly grim expression appeared on the silver-robed man's face. If that's the case, then things might become a little troublesome. That devilish crocodile was sacred ancestor Ming Luo's favorite steed, and sacred ancestor Ming Luo shared quite a close relationship with our sacred ancestor. As such, we can't really do much to this devilish crocodile. It's always been extremely uncouth and disobedient, and now that it's reached the holy grade, it's only going to be more difficult to control. That won't be good for our management of these mountain ranges, the crimson-robed man chimed in a gloomy manner. This is not something that's worthy of concern. Seeing as this devilish crocodile has already reached the holy grade, our matriarch naturally won't be able to continue to ignore it. All we have to do is inform our matriarch of this matter, and we won't have to worry about it any longer, the azure-robed man said in a confident manner. You're right. Our sacred ancestors' awakening is imminent, so this is indeed a feasible course of action, the silver-robed man approved with a stroke of his beard. All right, we'll do as you say. The crimson-robed man didn't offer any objections either. At this moment, the silver-robed man suddenly narrowed his eyes and asked, "Come to think of it, I'm really curious now. Our sacred ancestor is about to awaken soon, yet one of you has deployed an avatar, while the other has deployed their daughter. Is there something happening in the mountain ranges? What are your intentions, fellow Taoists?" Both the azure-robed man and the crimson-robed man faltered slightly upon hearing this question, and they reflexively exchanged a glance with one another. The crimson-robed man then chuckled in reply, "There's no need to ask a question you already know the answer to, Du Yan. Haven't you also deployed your subordinates into the mountain ranges? Don't tell me you don't know about the immortal Xianxia." Meanwhile, the azure-robed man remained silent with a dark expression on his face. Much to their surprise, the silver-robed man was rather dumbstruck as he replied, "Immortal Xianxia? What's that? I only deployed my subordinates to kill the outsider that killed my son so I can avenge him." The silver-robed man was naturally none other than the holy grade myriad I-Devil. After deploying Ju Yi to search for his son's killer, she was slain by the cave spirit that had been possessed by the heavenly devilish sovereign. Wu Qi was deployed in her place thereafter, and he'd led a massive horde of devilish beasts that had managed to intercept Han Li and the others, but they'd been split up due to the fact that there were 3 beings that had to be pursued at once. After that, Han Li was able to use the shadow puppet conjured up by his armor origin talisman to lure Wu Qi and his 2 subordinates into a trap, thereby allowing him to kill the trio with ease. As for all of the other devilish beasts, they had been led by the small 5-colored beast to the entrance leading into the Golden Devil mountain ranges, where they were preparing an ambush for Han Li and the others. As such, despite the fact that Du Yan had deployed many of his subordinates into the mountain ranges, he was still completely oblivious to the existence of the immortal Xianxia, which was why he was so taken aback by the crimson-robed man's words. As for the other 2 beings present, they were naturally none other than Tai Mo and Zhu Bai, both of whom were also holy-grade devilish beasts. Du Yan clearly didn't seem to be feigning ignorance, so it was now Zhu Bai's turn to be struck by a hint of surprise. A crimson light flashed through his eyes as he asked in a solemn voice, "Your son was killed. Why haven't we heard about this, Brother Du Yan? HMPH, is this some kind of glamorous news that I should be telling the entire world? Besides, both of you have been quite busy these past few days, so it's no surprise that you haven't heard about this." Du Yan replied in a derisive voice as his expression darkened significantly. "Ahem, my apologies, fellow Taoist." Zhu Bai cleared his throat in a slightly awkward manner. "Setting aside everything else for now, I'm quite interested in this immortal Xianxia you mentioned. Aren't you 2 going to tell me about it?" Du Yan continued. It's not actually an overly important matter. A spirit being of heaven and earth barged into these mountain ranges a few days ago. Even if we didn't tell you about this here, you'll most likely hear about it soon," Tai Mo chuckled in a nonchalant manner. "Oh, what kind of spirit being could have both of you so interested in it, to the point that you're even deploying your avatars and direct lineal descendants to search for it? You can continue to try and keep me in the dark, but do you really think I won't be able to find out all of this for myself? Come." Du Yan's expression darkened further as he abruptly clapped his hands together twice. Black light flashed from outside the palace, and a thin man wearing a suit of green armor walked into the room. He made his way over to the silver-robed elderly man before cupping his fist in a respectful salute. "Do you have some instructions for me, master?" "Go and research a spirit being known as an immortal Xianxia right away. Find out what it is and its current whereabouts," Du Yan ordered in a cold voice. "Yes, master," the green-armored man replied without any hesitation, and black light flashed from his body as he flew out of the gates as a streak of black light. Meanwhile, Tai Mo and Zhu Bai merely remained as they looked on from the side, and Zhu Bai even had a smile on his face. They seemed to be completely unfazed by what the silver-robed man was doing. Du Yan turned to his companions, and his expression darkened even further at the sight of their slightly gloating reactions. He let loose a cold harumph before continuing, "All right, that's enough about this immortal Xianxia. Let's move on to the main topic at hand. A few days ago, I received news that some abnormal activity has been observed from the interrealm passageway that we'd already sealed up. It appears that the beings from the Holy Realm are still unwilling to give up and are trying to access the passageway. The interrealm passageway, didn't our sacred ancestor destroy it using the profound heavenly treasure? How are there still beings who dare to try and access it?" Zhu Bai was rather surprised to hear this. "You not believe what I'm saying, Brother Zhu Bai?" Du Yan asked as he cast a cold gaze toward the crimson-robed man. "The interrealm passageway is an extremely important matter, so I wouldn't dare to doubt your words, Brother Du Yan," Zhu Bai replied in a slightly sheepish manner. "If there are other holy patriarchs in the Holy Realm, and they also possess profound heavenly treasures, then it won't be impossible for them to open the passageway again," Tai Mo mused as he stroked his chin. "That's impossible. If it weren't for the fact that we were in a dire situation and had no other choice, our sacred ancestor wouldn't have forced open a passageway at the expense of the profound heavenly treasure and a large chunk of her cultivation base. Even if other holy patriarchs possess profound heavenly treasures, why would they make such a sacrifice for no reason?" Zhu Bai countered. "Don't be so quick to jump to conclusions. If there are 2 or more holy patriarchs on the other side, and they're taking turns using the profound heavenly treasure to attack the passageway, perhaps they'd really be able to open it up with the treasure, and their cultivation bases all fully intact," Du Yan mused in a grave voice. Zhu Bai and Tai Mo both faltered upon hearing this before their expressions darkened significantly. "So be it, the abnormal activity being detected from the passageway is still very faint, so even if it does get opened up again, That'll be something that happens many years in the future. When that time comes, we'll leave it to our sacred ancestor to decide whether we fight or flee. Her awakening should be imminent, so there's definitely enough time. Taimo sighed with a wry smile on his face. Indeed, with our powers, there's no way that we'll be able to change the state of the interrealm passageway at all. Perhaps our matriarch will have a way to stop this, Zhu Bai said in an optimistic manner. Du Yan stroked his beard with a nod upon hearing this, and he opened his mouth to say something else. However, right at this moment, scintillating light suddenly erupted from the massive stone gate before them, following which countless bright pink runes that were flashing incessantly appeared over its surface. Our sacred ancestor has awakened, Zhu Bai immediately exclaimed upon seeing this. Expressions of surprise and elation appeared on the faces of all three holy grade devilish beasts, and they all stood up straighter as they faced the stone gate. The light swirling over the stone gate finally faded after around 10 minutes, and at the same time, the bright pink runes on its surface also instantly dimmed before disappearing completely. All three of the holy grade devils were staring at the stone gate in an unblinking manner, but there was no impatience in their eyes at all. However, the stone gate remained completely silent, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. After close to 2 hours, the stone gate finally creaked open on its own. All three devils immediately stirred upon seeing this. "Oh, all three of you are here already. Your diligence is quite commendable. Come in." A heavenly female voice with an indescribably gentle and mellow undertone sounded from the other side of the stone gate. Beyond the half-open stone gate, a vast expanse of pink light was flashing erratically in a rather intriguing manner. "Congratulations on your awakening, sacred ancestor. We'll come in to see you right away," Du Yan replied in a respectful manner as he extended a bow on behalf of all three devils. After that, the trio strode side by side toward the stone gate, and they were barely able to contain their excitement. As soon as they emerged on the other side, pink light flashed before their eyes, and they found themselves in a completely foreign landscape. The sky was of bright blue color with not a single cloud to be seen, and lush greenery stretched as far as the eyes could see, meeting the skyline at the horizon. It seemed that this was an infinitely vast realm. In the extremely far distance, there was a massive floral tree that was around 1,000 feet tall standing on the grasslands. The tree was entirely purple in color, while unidentifiable pink spirit flowers grew all over its branches. They appeared to be huge lotus flowers, and each of them was comparable to the size of a large bowl. Standing at the foot of the tree was a white humanoid figure, who was so beautiful that she didn't even seem to belong to this world. The massive floral tree seemed to be extremely far away, and the woman had her back facing the trio, but just sight of her gorgeous profile alone was enough to completely intoxicate most of the men under the heavens. The three devils all bowed in unison toward the woman from afar. "You've already come in, so why don't you come closer?" The woman chuckled as she raised an arm in a graceful manner, plucking down a large pink flower that was right above her head before tossing it behind her in a seemingly nonchalant manner. The giant pink flower rotated on the spot before exploding with a dull thump to form a burst of pink light. Pink light flashed before the eyes of the three devils, and their surroundings suddenly blurred. In the next instant, they found themselves less than 100 feet away from the giant floral tree. The three of them were rather startled by this development, before hurriedly extending another collective bow, with surprise and elation etched on their faces. "There's no need for formalities. You've all followed me for so many years, so I'm sure you know that I'm not a fan of such gestures." The woman didn't turn around, but her voice was extremely gentle and soothing. Despite what the woman was saying, the three devils didn't dare to skip any formalities as they extended another respectful bow unison before standing up straight again. "Thank you, sacred ancestor. Congratulations on returning to the height of your powers." "I wouldn't say I've returned to the height of my powers. Even now, I've only regained a small portion of my magic power. The remaining chunk of my cultivation base can't be recovered through slumber and cultivation alone. I have to recruit the assistance of some external items." The woman sighed in a resigned manner. External items. The three devils glanced at one another upon hearing this. Indeed, and they're not ordinary items either. However, this spirit realm is not inferior to our holy realm, so there should be a good chance that we'll be able to source those items, the woman murmured to herself, but the concerned expression on her face belied the confidence in her words. "Tell us what these items are, and as long as they exist in the spirit realm, we'll be sure to find them, sacred ancestor, Taimo vowed as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. The other two devils also chimed in to express their loyalty. I appreciate the thought, but this isn't our holy realm. Even though you're all holy grade beings and spirit realm beings with lowly cultivation bases won't be able to glean your true identities, your covers would most likely be blown if you were to encounter beings of similar cultivation bases. In that case, you'll all be in grave danger, so how will you find the items I'm looking for? I'll have to make a trip in person, the woman decided after a brief pause. You're going to go out in person. You can't, sacred ancestor. Your powers still haven't fully recovered. What if you encounter a being of the same cultivation base? Please reconsider, sacred ancestor. All three devils were quite alarmed to hear this, and they immediately tried to dissuade her. Don't worry, there's a negligible chance that I'll encounter a being of the same caliber as I am in the spirit realm. Most beings of that cultivation base would be in seclusion in their cave abodes, cultivating arduously to prepare for the heavenly tribulations that await them. Besides, even though I've only recovered a small portion of my magic power, I'm still more than capable of escaping even if I were to encounter beings on my level. Beings like us who are so close to taking that final step aren't that easy to kill, the woman consoled in a gentle voice. The three devils could tell that she'd already made up her mind, but they still begged her to reconsider. There's nothing to reconsider here. If I don't make this trip, my injuries will never be fully healed, and if my enemies from the Holy Realm pursue me all the way to this realm, I'll be completely powerless to resist. On top of that, I'll also be assigning duties to you here, so you won't be able to slack off either, the woman said with a decisive shake of her head. Please give us any orders you may have, sacred ancestor, Du Yan hurriedly urged in a respectful manner. The other two devils also stirred upon hearing this. During my slumber, has the inter-realm passageway leading to the Holy Realm been opened again? The woman suddenly asked. Nothing had happened to the passageway for man-years, but not long ago, we've begun detecting faint fluctuations from the other side. The fluctuations are very slight, but it seems that the beings of the Holy Realm are trying something again, Du Yan replied in a truthful manner. Both Taimo and Zubai also adopted solemn expressions upon hearing this. I see. Come to think of it, they should have had enough time to recover already, so it only makes sense that they're making a move now. I'm going to leave you three with a method to set up a massive spell formation that can temporarily bolster the power of the boundary between realms by around twofold. As such, it'll become quite a difficult task for the beings on the other side to open up the passageway again. However, creating this formation will require a vast amount of labor and resources, so the three of you will have to supervise the process in order to construct the formation as quickly as possible. During my absence, you can focus on this task, the woman said in a calm voice. Yes, sacred ancestor, the three devils replied in unison. A thought suddenly seemed to have occurred to the woman, and she asked, Oh, by the way, has anything urgent happened during my slumber? After exchanging a glance with his two companions, Taimo replied, There have been some noteworthy things that have happened in these mountain ranges during these past years, but most of them aren't worthy of being brought to your attention, sacred ancestor. However, there are two things that I must inform you of. Oh, go on then, the woman urged. After a brief hesitation, Taimo finally mustered up his courage and said, Prior to your entering your slumber, you gave us a segment of the damaged profound heavenly fortune blade for us to look after, but it was stolen by a holy grade devilish that then escaped from the mountain ranges, so we don't know where the blade segment is now. A segment of the fortune blade was stolen. Who is this devilish ape, and how did it appear in these mountain ranges? A hint of coldness crept into the woman's gentle voice. That devilish ape is most likely one of our pursuers that was unwittingly swept into this world back when you opened up the inter-realm passageway. It possesses a holy grade cultivation base, but it hid itself very well, and we failed to notice it for many years. During a time in which I was away, the ape suddenly attacked and stole the blade segment that was in my secret chamber. My negligence has resulted in the loss of the treasure, and I'm willing to accept the punishment for my oversight. Taimo lowered his head as he owned up to his mistake. The woman was silent for a moment before chuckling in a nonchalant manner. Back when the fortune blade was destroyed, it had already lost most of its powers, and it's since been split into 3 segments, so even I won't be able to repair the treasure. Seeing as there's no way to repair it anyway, it's no big deal that one of its segments was lost. What's the other thing you'd like to inform me of? Imo heaved an internal sigh of relief, and it was quite clear that a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders as he said, "Thank you for sparing me from punishment, sacred ancestor. The other thing is that sacred ancestor Ming Luo's steed, the Black Abyss crocodile, has recently successfully progressed to the holy grade. As such, it would be unwise to continue letting it do as it pleases in the mountain ranges. What's your opinion on the matter, sacred ancestor?" "Oh, so even that devilish crocodile has become a holy grade being. That's a pleasant surprise. In that case, I need someone to run some errands for me in my upcoming trip, so I'll bring it along with me." The woman chuckled upon hearing this. Her laughter was like heavenly music that was very intoxicating to listen to, and all three devils naturally nodded in agreement with this proposal. "Then, what the fortune blade segments that we're in possession of?" Zhu Bai asked in a careful manner. "Those things aren't very useful to me, so you can keep them as weapons to protect yourselves," the woman replied with a nonchalant wave of her hand. Zhu Bai and Duo Yan were ecstatic to hear this, and both of them immediately extended grateful salutes. "Thank you, sacred ancestor." With those blade segments, their powers would be significantly boosted. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D452, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 1D452, letter 1D4B8, letter 2134, letter 1D62E. Taimo was naturally quite envious toward them, but a thought then suddenly occurred to him, and he bowed as he continued. "By the way, sacred ancestor, we discovered an immortal Xianxia in the mountain ranges, which is a creature that's equivalent to a humanoid devilish spirit. Are you interested in it, sacred ancestor?" "A being that's equivalent to a humanoid devilish spirit. Such a thing exists in our mountain ranges. That thing would be ideal for cultivating avatars, and it would require a vast amount of time and effort to nurture one. I can't afford to place too much of my focus on it at the moment, so you three can capture it and do with it as you please." The woman was rather surprised to hear this, but she then shook her head in a disinterested manner. Du Yan was rather taken aback by this response, and a hint of elation crept into his eyes. Meanwhile, Taimo and Zhu Bai exchanged a glance with one another, looking as if they were about to say something, but refrained from doing so in the end. "All right, I've only just awakened, so I'm going to meditate for about a month before I leave these mountain ranges. After that, the three of you can take care of all of the matters in these mountain ranges without having to report anything to me." Seeing as everything important had been discussed, the woman waved a sleeve through the air, and pink light surged forth. In the next instant, the three devils felt their surroundings blur before they abruptly found themselves outside of the stone gate, as if they hadn't even walked through it in the first place. This was a rather shocking development to them. Even though our sacred ancestor hasn't recovered all of her powers, her abilities have only become more profound. "Looks like we won't have to worry about her when she goes out into the spirit realm," Taimo sighed in a relieved manner. "Indeed. Besides, our sacred ancestor has already made up her mind, so we won't be able to dissuade her anyway. All we have to do now is to follow her orders and do as we're told." Zhu Bai chimed in with a nod of his head. However, Du Yan's eyes were slightly narrowed, and a fake smile appeared on his face as he said, "So that immortal Xianxia is a being equivalent to a humanoid devilish spirit. No wonder you two are so interested in it. The sacred ancestor has told us to capture the treasure and do with it as we please, so it'll be a contest between us to see who can obtain the item first. In that case, I'll be going on ahead now." As soon as his voice fell, Du Yan immediately made a hand seal without waiting for a reply from his two companions. A gust of inky black devilish wind swept forth, and he abruptly disappeared on the spot. "That old bastard sure is impatient," Taimo scoffed in a disdainful manner. He, brother Du Yan must be feeling that he's already fallen behind in this race, so he naturally has to make haste. However, the fact that we haven't heard any news about the immortal Xianxia indicates that it most likely hasn't been captured by any of our subordinates. On top of that, your avatar was also destroyed not long ago, so the treasure has most likely fallen into the hands of an outsider. Looks like the outsiders who have ventured into these mountain ranges are no ordinary beings," Zhu Bai said in a slow voice as a crimson light flashed through his eyes. "That's hard to say. Perhaps the immortal Xianxia is still on the loose and hasn't fallen into anyone's hands yet. In any case, it's most likely too late for Du Yan to make arrangements in an attempt to capture it now. After all, those outsiders can only stay in our mountain ranges for a month, and most of them are not too far away from the exit already. Even if you and I were to get involved, there's no way we'll be able to get there in time. If I'd known that this would happen, I would have deployed more of my subordinates to search for the treasure," Taimo mused in a remorseful manner. Haha, it's not that you didn't want to deploy more beings. You were simply afraid that doing so would attract attention from myself and Brother Du Yan, right? Zubai chuckled. You can think whatever you want, Brother Zubai. I have to go back and wait for further news on the situation, so I'll also be taking my leave now, Tai Mo replied with a nonchalant smile, then also quickly departed from the palace. Zubai looked on expressionlessly at the palace gates for a long while before letting loose a cold chuckle. All of a sudden, crimson light flashed from his body, and he melted like a candle, disintegrating into a puddle of crimson liquid that seeped into the ground. Thus, the palace was completely emptied in the blink of an eye. Elsewhere, Han Li had transformed into a barely visible shadow and was hiding inside a nondescript black cloud. The exit of the Golden Devil mountain ranges was several tens of kilometers away, and he was appraising it with blue light shimmering within his narrowed eyes. The so-called exit was actually nothing more than a stretch of empty space that was only several kilometers in length. If one wanted to leave the Golden Devil mountain ranges, this was the place through which they could do so. The entire space seemed to be completely empty, but through the use of his bright-sight spirit eyes, Han Li could see hundreds of gray shadows and balls of black chi lurking nearby out of plain sight. Han Li stroked his chin as a contemplative look appeared on his face, and he suddenly flipped a hand over to produce a purple talisman. He plastered a talisman onto his body, and a cloud of purple mist wafted through the air with silver runes swirling within it. After that, his body abruptly vanished into thin air. Thus, Han Li drifted out of the clouds and flew through the air in an unhurried manner. He'd already confirmed that there were no holy grade beings in the nearby area, so he wasn't concerned that any devilish beast would be able to blow his cover, and he drifted along right out in the open in a blatant manner. The devilish beasts lurking nearby didn't discover anything amiss, and all of them continued to remain in ambush. Han Li was quite pleased to see this, and within mere moments, he was only just over 1,000 feet away from the exit. However, right at this moment, a burst of colorful light suddenly erupted from a small five-colored beast's body without any premonition, and the light swept forth to encompass an area with a radius of over 10,000 feet. Han Li felt a surge of heat rush over his entire body, following which the effect of his high zenith invisibility talisman was abruptly broken. As such, Han Li found himself completely exposed before over 100 mid-grade and high-grade devilish beasts, and his expression instantly changed drastically. He didn't know what kind of secret technique this colorful light was, but it had to quite extraordinary to have been able to nullify the effect of his invisibility talisman. Furthermore, how did that devilish beast even know that he was nearby? However, before Han Li could ponder this issue any further, an even more unexpected event took place. In the instant that his cover was blown, azure light flashed from several hundred feet away, following which another familiar slender figure also emerged out of thin air. He focused his gaze in that direction to find that it was Xianxia. She had also been using some kind of profound concealment technique that had even managed to fool his bright-sight spirit eyes. However, as she was exposed to all of these devilish beasts, her expression also changed drastically. Han Li was extremely shocked by this development, and he immediately made a hand seal as a loud thunderclap erupted behind him, following which a pair of translucent wings appeared on his back. Xianxia also managed to quickly recompose herself before opening her mouth to expel a shimmering silver talisman. Immediately thereafter, thunderous roars erupted from all directions as black devilish chi erupted into the heavens before converging toward the center. Over 100 mid-grade and high-grade devilish beasts had sprung into action at once, and their collective attack was naturally extremely powerful, so much so that even body integration stage beings definitely wouldn't want to be struck by such a fierce assault. Han Li drew in a sharp breath before flapping his wings, and his body shot forth as an azure and white thread before vanishing into thin air. Meanwhile, Xianxia plastered the silver talisman she just summoned onto her body, and she also abruptly disappeared amid a flash of silver light. The devilish chi came crashing down from all sides, and in the next instant, an azure and white thread reappeared. Immediately thereafter, Han Li emerged in front of the exit that was over 1,000 feet away, and he cast a final glance at the small five-colored beast before disappearing into the exit. After that, Xianxia also reappeared in front of the exit amid another flash of silver light. She turned to the devilish beasts behind her with a dainty smile before vanishing into the exit as well. The black chi in the air above dispersed, and over 100 devilish beasts appeared, all of which were staring at one another. A streak of five-colored light flashed, and the five-colored beast appeared before all of its companions with a dark expression on its face. We let them get away. It's all our fault for being so useless, the boar-like devilish beast grumbled in a frustrated manner. Expressions of frustration and shame also appeared on the faces of all of the other high-grade devilish beasts nearby. Don't be so hard on yourselves. Those two possessed extremely potent concealment techniques, and even I only managed to detect one of them. I had no idea that a second being was also in the area. Are we going to keep ambushing others here then? A certain high-grade devilish beast asked. Of course, even if we don't catch the right beings, we can't just go back empty-handed, the five-colored beast replied with a wry smile. All of the other devilish beasts clearly agreed with this sentiment, and they dispersed before concealing themselves in the nearby area again. Han Li was enshrouded within a ball of silver light as he flew through the air. Countless arcs of azure lighting were crashing down upon the ball of light that he was situated in, and there was another ball of silver light not far behind him that was also slowly advancing through the sea of lightning. Several hours later, two balls of silver light emerged on the other side of the realm of lightning, following which the silver light faded to reveal a pair of giant silver umbrellas. Standing beneath the umbrellas were naturally none other than Han Li and Xianxia. Thank heavens we made it out of there. I really shot myself in the foot this time. Not only did I fail to obtain the true Kirin essence, I've also expended a lot of my magic power and treasures. On top of that, I also owe you an enormous debt, fellow Taoist Han, Xianxia sighed as she cast her gaze toward Han Li. There's no need to dwell on the negatives, Fairy Xian. So many mishaps occurred and we encountered far more high-grade devilish beasts than we expected, so we're very fortunate to have even come out alive, Han Li consoled as a relieved smile appeared on his face. That's true. With so many high-grade devilish beasts hiding near the exit, there are most likely going to be very few beings that will emerge alive. In any case, that's none of our concern. Let's get out of here. Xianxia heaved a long sigh as she cast her gaze back toward the restriction they just emerged from. Han Li naturally nodded in agreement, and the two of them quickly sped into the mist up ahead. Around 2 hours after they departed, white light suddenly flashed from another direction within the mist. Immediately thereafter, a streak of piercing white light shot forth before fading to reveal a humanoid figure. This was a portly old man in a set of brocade robes, and he wore a concerned look on his face. He hurriedly inspected his surroundings before murmuring to himself, I've only been away for less than half a day, so surely I wouldn't be unlucky enough to have missed some people already. I'm going to teach that madman a lesson once I've taken care of the matters here. He's well aware that I have some urgent matters to attend to, but he insisted on sparring with me so he could show off some new ability of his. Nothing good ever comes from meeting him. The elderly man grumbled to himself in a frustrated manner. This was a body integration stage being, and it was none other than the one who had offered the extravagant reward for the immortal Xianxia. He had been waiting here for several days already, and never would he have thought that he really had missed his target during the brief period of time that he'd been away. Perhaps it was simply Han Li's lucky day, or perhaps the old man had been desperately unlucky. After that, the old man made a hand seal, and his body gradually faded before vanishing into the mist. Han Li was naturally unaware of the fact that he'd unwittingly just saved himself from having to deal with a heap of trouble. Instead of returning to Lightning Cloud Town, they passed by it and continued to travel through the sea of mist. Over half a day later, the two of them finally emerged from the sea of mist, and after flying for around a month further, the grand outline of Cloud City finally appeared on the horizon. Only then did the two of them temporarily stop in midair. Fairy Xian, in order to avoid being noticed, I think we should split up and enter the city separately, Han Li suggested in a calm manner. Xianxia contemplated his words momentarily before smiling as she proposed. Indeed, Brother Han, we'd most likely attract some attention if we were to enter the city together. How about this? You enter the city first, and I'll follow along 15 minutes later. No problem, Han Li agreed with a quick nod. By the way, you can give the holy grade devilish core to me before we part. In order to repair the suit of heavenly devilish armor, I have to use a secret technique to refine the devilish core first. If you give it to me now, I'll be able to repair it as early as possible, Xianxia continued with a smile. Han Li smiled in response before immediately raising a hand, sending a jade box flying directly toward Xianxia. A hint of surprise flashed through Xianxia's eyes as she raised a hand to draw the jade box into her grasp. However, she didn't immediately take off the lid. Instead, she stared at Han Li momentarily before suddenly bursting into laughter. "You sure do trust me to be handing over such a precious treasure without even a second thought, Brother Han." It's not a matter of trust. It's just that I'm sure you're smart enough not to do anything unwise just for a mere holy-grade devilish core," Han Li replied with an indifferent shake of his head. "In any case, I'll be sure not to betray your trust, Brother Han. You can come to my shop in half a month, and I'll have the repaired heavenly devilish armor waiting for you," Xian said with a smile. "Then I'll be thanking you in advance, Fairy Xian." Han Li also smiled upon hearing this. After chatting for a while longer, Han Li cupped his fist in a salute and went on ahead. He rose up in the air as a streak of azure light, and disappeared into the cloud mist up above in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Xian remained standing on the spot, casting her gaze toward the direction that Han Li had departed in, seemingly in deep thought about something. "Are you trying to befriend this person?" A voice suddenly rang out from within her body. "You're awake." Xian was quite elated to hear this voice, and she immediately swept a sleeve through the air. A ball of azure light instantly shot forth from within, before transforming into a fist-sized Kirin projection. The projection shook its head with a wry smile as it said, "I already forced myself to awaken a few days ago, but I'm in a severely depleted state after helping you unleash so many types of secret techniques, so I rested in silence for the past few days." Our trip proved to be completely fruitless this time. Not only was the cave spirit possessed by a heavenly devilish sovereign, even a being of the same nature as you arrived to foil our plans. If it weren't for our good luck in some critical moments, we really could have perished in there, Xian sighed in a resigned manner. "Indeed, it's quite fortunate that that Han brat is far more powerful than we anticipated. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have been able to emerge from the Golden Devil mountain ranges alive. Are you planning to befriend him in order to prepare for our next trip to the True Spirit Cave?" the Kirin projection asked. "The next time the True Spirit Cave appears will be many years later, and there's no point in thinking about something so far away. Even if I didn't take that into account, the fact of the matter is that this man seems to be no less powerful than a holy race being, so there's certainly no harm in trying to befriend him," Xian said with a smile. After a moment of contemplation, the Kirin projection nodded in response. "That's true. Such an astonishingly powerful 7th-tier upper race being could prove to be a powerful ally in the future. I really am very disappointed that we expended so many treasures and took so many risks all for nothing," Xian sighed in a gloomy manner. The Kirin projection was silent for a long while before chuckling in a nonchalant manner. There's no need for you to be so dejected. You won't be able to obtain the true Kirin essence for now, but that doesn't mean I don't have other ways to enhance your constitution and help you reach the holy race." Xian faltered slightly upon hearing this before an ecstatic look appeared on her face, and she asked, "What? Do you know the location of a second True Spirit Cave?" That's naturally impossible, but instead, I know the location of a set of ancient runes. That was a place where a vastly renowned pill refinement master had lived during ancient times." The Kirin projection began in a mysterious voice, and Xian listened intently to its story. Thus, Han Li returned to Cloud City and strode through the city gates. Meanwhile, countless kilometers away, within a damp swamp in the Golden Devil mountain ranges, there was a black-robed man with a dark and hideous face seated on a green rock with his legs crossed. The man had his eyes closed, and as he slowly inhaled and exhaled, the black devilish chi in the surrounding area swirled around him as if it possessed a mind of its own. The man was clearly practicing some kind of mystical cultivation art, and he seemed to be completely absorbed in his cultivation. After a long while, he took a deep breath and opened his mouth to devour all of the devilish chi in the surrounding area, then opened his eyes with a content look on his face. However, his expression immediately stiffened as he cast his gaze around him. Around 10 feet away from him, there stood a woman in a long white dress. Her feet were bare and her black hair was swaying gently in the breeze as she appraised him with a smile on her face. The woman wasn't exactly an ideal beauty. Her mouth was slightly too large to satisfy the image of a classical beauty, but her eyes were as bright as stars. Her nose appeared as if it had been chiseled out of the finest white jade, and her skin was as fair as snow. These captivating features made her far more alluring than the vast majority of beauties under the heavens. After catching a clear glimpse of the woman, the man hurriedly rolled off his rocks and kowtowed as he greeted, "Sacred Ancestor." Hai pays his respects to the Sacred Ancestor. This man was none other than the Black Abyss crocodile that had just progressed to the Holy Grade not long ago. Prior to this, he'd caught up to the old man with the Yan surname and killed him, but failed to find the immortal Xianxia. As such, he returned to the location that he'd agreed to meet Ju Chu at, only to be later informed that the giant toad had been slain by Han Li. It was completely flabbergasted by this news, but it had no choice but to leave in a dejected manner. After that, he came to this place to cultivate and fortify his cultivation base, which had still been rather unstable following his breakthrough. However, never would he have thought that the woman whom he'd thought was still in slumber would suddenly decide to seek him out. With her unfathomable powers, she'd be able to kill him without even raising a single finger. With that in mind, the devilish crocodile was completely petrified, and he didn't know whether this visit was going to spell disaster or fortune for him. "You may rise. You really have progressed to the Holy Grade. Not bad at all. Looks like Sister Ming Luo didn't feed you all those spirit medicines for nothing. With how much she was feeding you, it was only a matter of time before you reached this level unless you possessed extremely mediocre aptitude. Looks like you've also managed to activate the evil dragon bloodline within your body," the woman chuckled. The man's expression changed drastically upon hearing this, and a wry smile appeared on his face as he said, "You know about this as well, Sacred Ancestor." "Of course I do. Otherwise, Ming Luo wouldn't have fed you so much spirit medicine even if you were her favorite steed. Among all true spirit bloodlines, the evil dragon bloodline possesses the most potent devilish power. A mature and fully awakened evil dragon could even devour heavenly devilish monarchs and are comparable to heavenly devilish sovereigns. You've only inherited the evil dragon bloodline, but I presume that your powers aren't inferior to mid-holy grade beings. Even if my 3 subordinates were to battle you 1-1-1, they most likely wouldn't be able to defeat you," the woman said in a meaningful voice. "You're far too kind, Sacred Ancestor. I can't compare with the likes of fellow Taoist Zhu Bai and fellow Taoist Tai Mo," the man replied in an extremely modest manner, which was in stark contrast to his usual uncouth and arrogant mannerisms. "Sister Ming Luo disappeared during the war in the Holy Realm, and we were as close as sisters before her disappearance. Seeing as you've successfully made a breakthrough, you can follow me for now. I'm preparing to go on a trip. You should make some preparations too." The woman changed the subject and cut straight to the chase. "You're going to leave the Golden Devil mountain ranges." The man was quite stunned to hear this. "Indeed, judging from your reaction, are you unwilling to accompany me?" The man's forehead was immediately drenched in cold sweat upon hearing this, and he hurriedly explained, "Of course not. Being able to serve you by your side is a stroke of immense fortune for me, Sacred Ancestor." The woman seemed to find the man's panicked expression quite amusing, and she smiled as she said, "In that case, there's no need to prepare anything, just come with me." "Haha, I've always been living alone, so I don't have anything to prepare anyway," the man laughed in a rather forced manner. The woman chuckled upon hearing this, and she swept a sleeve through the air, sending a burst of pink light surging forth in all directions. A peculiar fragrance instantly permeated through the air, and pink light enveloped the bodies of both the man and the woman. After the pink spiritual light faded, both of them had already vanished. The woman had unleashed her strange ability again to move herself, and the man directly away from this place. Back at the Dreamcloud Mountains of Cloud City, Han Li returned to his cave abode before immediately checking through all of the restrictions. After ascertaining that no one had infiltrated his cave abode during his absence, he slumped onto his bed and fell into a deep sleep. Even though his journey to the Golden Devil mountain ranges hadn't been very long, it had been quite perilous. Not only had he expended a lot of magic power, he was also very exhausted, so he sorely required some rest and recuperation. Thus, he slept for 2 days and 2 nights. When he woke up again, he was completely energized and refreshed, and immediately got up before making his way toward his secret chamber. He had reaped a lot of rewards from his recently concluded trip, and he had to sort through all of the treasures he'd obtained. Moments later, Han Li arrived in a secret chamber that was several hundred feet in size, and he swept a sleeve through the air toward the stone door. Not only did the door close at his behest, a layer of azure light emerged from the stone walls around him, encapsulating the entire secret chamber in an azure barrier. After doing all that, Han Li sat down on the futon at the center of the chamber in a cross-legged manner, then stroked his chin as he fell into deep thought. Moments later, he flicked his wrist, and a streaked black light shot forth from within his sleeve before hovering in midair right in front of him. It was none other than his storage bracelet. Han Li pointed a finger at the bracelet, and a certain object emerged from within it amid a flash of black light. The object fell onto the ground with an extremely heavy thump, and it was revealed to the mummified corpse of the holy grey devilish ape. There was a large hole in its dantian, but there was no blood flowing from the large puncture wound, thereby creating a rather peculiar sight to behold. Han Li looked at the dried corpse, which was several tens of feet long, and a pleased look appeared on his face. He's already extracted the devilish core from the body of this devilish ape, and it seemed to have lost most of its blood essence, but its body was still extremely powerful. All of its bones, tendons, and ligaments were all extremely precious materials that could be used for tool refinement. However, Han Li hadn't decided to take this corpse with him with tool refinement in mind. Instead, he wanted to extract the giant mountain ape true blood contained within the devilish ape's body. Seeing as the corpse had already dried to this extent, he wasn't sure whether he'd actually be able to extract any true spirit blood from it, but he could only try his best to do so. For normal cultivators, extracting true spirit blood was quite a troublesome prospect. However, this was not an issue at all to Han Li, who had cultivated the 12 awakening transformations. As long as the true spirit blood that he was trying to extract belonged to one of the 12 transformations, he would be able to use a secret technique that was enclosed within this cultivation art to forcibly extract true spirit blood out of a spirit beast's body. Of course, the amount and the level of purity of the true spirit blood extracted hinged on how much of the true spirit being's bloodline the spirit beast in question had inherited, as well as how powerful the spirit beast was. After all, even if a spirit beast had only inherited an extremely small amount of a true spirit being's bloodline, they could increase the purity of the true spirit blood within their body through progressing in cultivation. Among the true spirit bloods he'd already obtained, the purest was naturally the Kun Peng true blood from the Tian Peng race, while the true blood of the five-colored peacock was the one that he'd obtained the largest quantity of. On the other end of the spectrum, the true dragon and heavenly phoenix true spirits bloods were the ones that he'd obtained the smallest quantity of. Those two true spirit bloods were ones that he'd only managed to obtain by chance, and they'd been extracted from the bodies of mere deity transformation cultivators from the two true spirit families, so the level of purity wasn't very high either. Among the true spirit beings, true dragons and heavenly phoenixes ranked well above the Kun Peng and the five-colored peacock, yet his transformations into the latter two beings were far more powerful than the former. Furthermore, among all of the information that Han Li had gleaned from the spiritual sense of the past Grand Elder of the Kun Peng race, the information surrounding the Kun Peng transformation, as well as other bird-type transformations, had been far more extensive compared to other types of transformations. As such, Han Li rarely ever used his true dragon and heavenly phoenix transformation, predominantly employing his Kun Peng and five-colored peacock transformations in battle instead. The devil ape that Han Li had slain was a mid-body integration stage being, so even if it barely had any blood essence left, the true spirit blood within its body was surely going to be of an extremely high purity. As such, Han Li was naturally very much looking forward to this. At this moment, Han Li already had his eyes closed, and he was chanting something while flicking his 10 fingers incessantly toward the massive corpse before him. Incantation seals of different colors flew from his fingertips before disappearing into the corpse, and lights of different colors began to surface over its body. At the same time, runes of different sizes began to emerge from the dried corpse, and as Han Li's chanting grew faster and faster, the entire corpse was enshrouded under a layer of light as if a vibrant, colorful veil had been draped over it. All of a sudden, Han Li opened his eyes and yelled, "Rise!" Spiritual light flashed all over the body, and it slowly rose up into the air. A peculiar scene then ensued. The veil of colorful light around the corpse abruptly tightened, and the light seemed to be imbued with incredibly immense power as it began crushing and compressing the body amid a string of cracks and pops. From 40 to 30 feet down to 20 feet, then down to only around 10 feet in size. Around 10 minutes later, the devilish ape's corpse had been compressed down to around 4 feet in size. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he laid a hand on top of his own head. Golden and azure light abruptly flashed, following which a chubby nascent soul that was around 3 inches tall emerged. As soon as it appeared, it focused its gaze on the devilish ape's body, and a smile appeared on its face before it opened its mouth. A stream of azure flames that was around as thick as a human finger shot forth from within, traveling directly toward the devilish corpse. 1. In traditional Chinese beauty standards, a woman would ideally have a small mouth. The exact term used is Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, which literally translates to small cherry mouth, so basically a small mouth with a pair of vibrant cherry red lips.